Okay, I think we will get started. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Oh, we are just so overwhelmed with the support for this workshop. We know this is a really, really critical issue, but it's really great to see how much support we're getting for actually addressing this issue and having this forum, because I think it's really important that we talk about this, because this is potentially the most serious concern we've had in this industry for as long as I've been around. So we need to have this conversation. This is going to be a very, very useful session. Thank you to all the speakers that agreed to be here. We've got some really, really knowledgeable people talking about this issue, and I think it's going to make the conversation much more fruitful. I want to thank County of Strathcona for allowing us to be here in this facility. But at the same time, I also need to acknowledge the City of Edmonton, because they were our supporters from the beginning. Our intention was to have this at the Waste Management Center. We could not fit there. So Strathcona County stepped in at the last minute and said, you know what, we can provide this venue, and it's fantastic. Thank you so much, Leah, for doing this, because this allowed us to not have to cut off registrations, and we've ended up just over 100 people here. So fantastic to be able to have that group. So thank you. And thank you also to our sponsors, the Canadian Plastics Industry Association, as well as the Alberta Plastics Recycling Association. Thank you very much for supporting this. And we are actually going to start with Tammy from Alberta Plastics Recycling Association, and also representing CPIA. She's going to give a brief presentation to just provide some context on this issue and some of the potential solutions. So that will kick us off, and then we will move into our next two speakers. What we'll do is we will have a very small amount of questions throughout, but we will have most of our questions during the panel discussions at the end. So if you have burning questions, just, you know, if I don't get to you right away, just hang on to them, and we will address those for sure at the end if we don't right away. Oh, I just realized I didn't introduce myself. I'm Christina Seidel. Sorry, I just assume everybody knows me. I'm the Executive Director of the Recycling Council of Alberta. Thank you again for coming, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Tammy Schwass, who is going to speak from APRA's perspective.
Does this one work? Oh, this.
Yeah, if you press speak, it works.
Oh, look at that. I'll see which one works better here. Can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. Thanks, Christina. We really appreciate the opportunity to come out. As Christina mentioned, I'm with the Alberta Plastics Recycling Association, and this presentation is also in partnership with the Canadian Plastics Industry Association, who's a close partner to us. We help facilitate plastics recycling here in the province, and talked to and heard from a lot of you about some of these issues. And as Christina said, we wanted to start off this discussion with a little bit of an intro. I'm not going to get into the context so much. I think most of you are aware of why we're here. I'm going to talk about some of what we're going to need to do in coming into the future, in the short term and long term. So really, what actions can we take, and how do we do that? I think we're going to have to change our mindset about recycling and about the turbulent markets overseas. So we really need to work together. It's a collaborative approach to this, and it's not going to be a quick or easy solution, but I think there's some things we can do. We need to look at expanding our infrastructure in North America so that we have the processing capabilities and the technologies here in order to do that. I think that better quality really begins at the curb with the residents and consumers, and we need them to recycle in a way that is providing us the material and the quality that's there. So we want to get rid of wish cycling or things like that in order to improve the quality. I think some of what I've talked to from some of our processors in the audience, they've already had to adopt and adapt the way that their MRFs are working and the sorting that goes on at those facilities. And that possibly, I mean, they're the experts in that, so I won't talk about that. I'll leave that to them to address in their presentations. But I think that immediately maybe looks like slowing down the lines, increasing some manual checks, and similar to the ways that things have changed over the years from when we first started recycling, we need to look at what those changes are again. Within that, I think technology is one of the keys in order to help us move forward on this path. And I know that the CPIA is working with some others here in the audience on the MRF of the future and looking how we can sort different materials like plastics, packaging, and different types of materials from the recycling stream and get value and recycle those materials. We also need to, and Tony reiterated this again when we were talking earlier, we need to create better relationships with our processors and with our markets. And I think that by doing that, we create local jobs, we boost the economy in Canada, and we also create stability over the long term. Within that, creating local markets, and when I say local, North American manufacturing opportunities for recycled resin. And I think that government as well as industry organizations have a role in promoting this in order to, with incentives and to increase funding opportunities as well for those types of manufactured content. And as well the procurement policies and addressing those within the government or within businesses and manufacturing. Grant Harrington is a processor down in Lethbridge, and they recycle plastics into fence boards and playground equipment and that sort of material. And I think that we need to look at supporting local businesses like Grant and how we can build in those types of procurement opportunities. So with that, brief intro in terms of some of the ideas from myself and CPIA in terms of moving ahead, and I'll pass it back to Christina and the experts on the panel here this afternoon.
Thanks, Tammy. Really appreciate that context. That's really gives us a good kickoff for going into the rest of the session. So now I am going to call on Tom Baranowski. Tom, we are so thrilled to have you coming to us all the way, and I'm sure you're not that thrilled to be here where it's cold, but was it raining in Seattle when you left? No, it was sunny. Okay, of course, of course. 70 degrees. But thank you so much for coming. We really looked to get real experts that can address your questions and really present, because we want to present the real story. What is the real issue and what are we dealing with? So Tom, it's interesting. He has a real breadth of experience. He actually started at the recycling plant level, and that gives him some real hands-on experience. But he's with Seaport International, and it's interesting because they're a huge broker. I actually had to really be educated about them. Lorenzo had to tell me all about them. But they are one of the largest paper brokerage firms, and they specialize in paper, pulp, and the recycling industry, and they deal a lot with Asia. So he really understands this business from the ground level up, and we're really thrilled to have Tom here, and he's going to give us a bit of a perspective on where he sees us, where we are and where we're headed.
Well, certainly there's changes. I mean, this is probably in 30 years I've been in the industry, this is by far the biggest change that I've seen. And the interesting thing, it's happened so quickly, and it's still changing as we go forward. Christina indicated I started my career with the Weyerhaeuser Company, and in the recycling business. That business actually started in '73, predominantly to reach into the secondary fiber market and find a low-cost alternative to manufacturing paper, in other words, recycled. Really important that that is understood, because I believe without the end pulling what we're collecting, it really makes no sense. So it's an economic thing, and that's where it started with Weyerhaeuser. You know, when I was with Weyerhaeuser, we would go into businesses and we would set them up on recycling programs, and there was a benefit to the business because there was a reduction in cost, as well as the continued demand for the paper that was being generated. first 10 years of my career, basically we were looking at opportunities from the demand side. Okay, who can we partner with to pull more of this material out of the stream? So even though it was the right thing to do, it was also done with an economic flair to it, if you will. You know, along with that, there were viable markets export. Asia was a big consumer. Japan at one time was a negative consumer or importer of waste paper. The Pacific Rim was also, there were viable homes and markets for that. But what was interesting there is that there was a universal specification for the various grades of paper that were out there. And that was important because we were all working off the same song sheet. You know, the success of the commercial recycling, really it led into the residential collection. More and more domestic mills were expanding their de-inking capacity. And so where were we going to get the tons? And that was, you know, the next thing was on the residential side. And, you know, it started kind of grassroots. You had drop-off centers. You had fundraisers. I don't know if anybody remembers the newspaper fundraisers. You know, 2-3 bin approach to curbside collection. I mean, it was all successful. It was all done with quality in mind. Again, going and pulling out what was wanted from the marketplace. You know, and at Weyerhaeuser, I think we had, when I started, there were 15 facilities dotted around the country. We expanded that to over 30. But these facilities were really low tech. And they were low tech because, again, what we were doing is we were trying to get a source separated approach. And taking what our customers wanted, which were the paper mills, and giving them the product that they wanted. You know, and I'll say this a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but, you know, eventually I think we started to build a house of cards. And I say that because single stream came into the mix, and, you know, it was a great approach. There are many, many reasons why single stream came about. And I think the biggest that I know of was the reduction in collection costs. Communities were wanting to reduce the cost, and they were wanting to expand, and they were wanting to make it easier. And proliferation of single stream programs. I think a lot of them started out with a relatively small specification on what can be expanded, but over the years we saw it grow more and more and more. Along that same line, China was something that, you know, we can't ignore. China had a massive expansion into the paper making industry. Without a doubt, the largest paper manufacturer in the world now, and their demand was just insatiable. You know, it was interesting. It's interesting to look how that expanded into growing programs. We lost an idea of a specification. Okay, I think what happened is as these mills came online, they needed to compete for material. And in order to do that, they loosened the specification. You know, what was less than 1% became 2% was acceptable, 3, 4, 5. A lot of the single stream that's out there right now is double-digit prohibitive levels. You know, China did a great job. They expanded new technology, state-of-the-art paper machines, but they haven't figured out how to make paper out of glass, aluminum, and plastic and tin, and I don't think they ever will. And so that's always been there. Okay, that level of contamination has always been there, and what you started to see happen was kind of an exodus, if you will, from the domestic or North America capacity. Paper mills expanded and they took on investments, okay, to expand their de-inking capacity. And because, again, they were getting what they wanted and they wanted more of it. It was cheaper. It was better economic decision than chips or market pulp. But what had happened as, you know, and again, time frame, it's all pretty much consecutive. As China expanded, the demand for this material expanded, and the value, the market price increased. Okay, that's one thing. But what also increased was the contamination. And what Christina didn't mention is I spent a lot of my years within a paper mill. And I do understand the paper making process. And at the paper mill, I would see mountains of this material that was screened out. And it just became cost prohibitive for these paper mills to continue to do that. Keep in mind that's 20% of what they were getting in ultimately was screened out and ended up in the landfill. So China expanded, domestic dropped off because, again, too expensive and they didn't want to deal with what they had to deal with. I'm trying to keep this short because I know I have 15 minutes. 2013 green fence. Most of you have probably heard about it. I know the next presenter is going to talk more in detail about it. But the Chinese government recognized that their quality was out of control. The quality that was going in there was out of control. And so it was an ill-fated attempt to try to control this quality. A short blip with respect to people changing and adjusting. There was material rejected, but ultimately that material ended up back in Hong Kong, repackaged and sent back to China. So there was no teeth in this. And that faded. And then you've got the green fence, or the National Sword and the Blue Sky program, which was what we're facing with now. Different animal. China is committed to this, and they're going to force the industry to comply. Right now, the demand over in China for this material is huge. The mills are hurting. They need the material. What's happened is people aren't taking the risk. They don't want what potentially could happen in return containers. The last estimate I heard was $5,000 to get a can back from China back to North America, the cost of one can. And nobody wants to take that risk. So what's happening is we've got mountains of material that's building. We've got subpar material that doesn't have a home for it. The domestics don't have the infrastructure to consume it. And ultimately, a lot of it's ended up in the landfill. Seattle just announced what they're landfilling. Communities are going to end up landfilling material. It's interesting, the Washington State Recycling Association and the Oregon Recycling Association are changing the specifications of their single stream recommendations for any single stream program. It's quite frankly, personally, I think this is long overdue from a paper making standpoint. It's long overdue. I think it's good. I think it's a gut check. I think a lot of us lost really why we're doing it and what we're doing it. I think sustainability is important, but I think we all need to agree to what sustainable is. Just because we collect it doesn't mean it's recycled. I think, all of us, and I know I'm part to blame, but all of us in the room can take some responsibility for this. I think municipalities really have to take a strong look at what they demand their service providers. I think there's got to be a realistic approach. To expect, I guess, to expect the private sector to take responsibility, I think is ill-fated. I really do. I know back, there's a big push to have diversion rates. Everybody wanted to one-up diversion rates. And they did so, I think, at the expense of what ultimately is ending up at the landfill. I think it's important we understand where these markets are and who they are. I think we'd be appalled to take a look at, case in point now is, where's some of this material going? I mean, it's Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and those countries, those developing countries. I would challenge anybody to truly understand what's happening in those developing countries with some of this material. They're not making paper out of plastic, glass, aluminum, and tin. It's not happening. Is the Pacific garbage patch? Have we caused some of that? Again, where does this material go? The horror stories are out there, and I think are very real. So again, from my perspective, from the paper making perspective, from the manufacturing perspective, this is long overdue. I think what you're going to start to see is as this worldwide spec gets tighter and it gets more defined, you're going to see more and more domestic consumers come back into the marketplace. It's a cleaner product. That's going to happen. It is happening right now as we speak. I mean, there are mills that never migrated away, but I guarantee you they're saying, thank you very much, China, for stepping up and doing what I believe is right. I think this is a positive approach, and I think it will continue to make recycling sustainable, at least on the paper side. So, in a nutshell, are there any questions that might pop up?
Sharon Howland, City of Calgary. Are you, as a broker, sending anything to China?
Yes. Yes, we are.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Yes, we are sending material to China. It meets a very tight specification. It has to be 1/2 of 1% or less prohibitive level. And we do, you know, there's inspections that take place at the facility. There's a tremendous amount of inspection that goes on picture taking. So, yeah, if you can meet the spec, the demand is strong. It's there. The problem is the risk. And without getting too specific, if I'm selling 5 containers overseas and I'm working on a bill of lading, these mills work on import quotas, and it's done on a bill of lading system. So you could have 5 from me, 5 from multiple people. Well, if one of those containers doesn't meet the spec, the whole bill of lading potentially comes back. So the risk is tremendous. So, but short answer is yes, we are shipping into China as we speak.
What kind of organization or industry is meeting that 0.5?
A lot of people are. A lot of people are. I mean, the improvements that are phenomenal that have been made. I mean, we've gone from double-digit prohibitives on a regular basis down to single digits. Again, most of it is commercial generated. There's not a lot of single stream that meets the specification because of the risk associated with it. So it's mostly commercially generated.
Hi, I'm Isabel with Carton Council. I'm
Hi.
based in Toronto, so I'm wondering, maybe the picture is different here in Western Canada, but regarding one of the last comments you made with domestic mills and domestic capacity, it's my understanding that the mill industry as a whole is not doing overly well. Like, we hear about mill closures often regularly.
Right.
So do you think there is enough capacity to handle what's coming out of
No, definitely not. And I agree. There are segments of like printing and writing papers, for example. I mean, that's been on the downswing. But packaging and carton material is on the upswing. So you've got different segments that are expanding, and you've got also different segments that are contracting. But in North America, there's not a chance that we can handle all that's currently generated domestically without China. Or without another. And again, China, it took 15 years for China to get where they are today. You know, if China decides they don't want to be paper manufacturing, which possibly is what they're doing, where else is it going to be manufactured and how quickly? Again, things we don't know. And one point, you know, and I kind of go out on a tangent here, but you know, we have cultural differences in what we've done in North America versus what's happening in China. And there are cultural differences that play into this, and they will continue to play into this. So they view change on a very long-term scale. Generally in North America, we want change, but we want it yesterday. You know, so we got to be careful there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. What a great introduction to what we're going to be talking about for the afternoon. Fantastic. So it's not your last shot at Tom either, because he's going to be back up a couple more times. So keep any extra questions you have, certainly to ask him later. We're going to now bring up Lorenzo Danini, And Lorenzo, a lot of us remember Lorenzo historically as the owner of Evergreen Ecological Services. So Evergreen really turned the recycling industry on its head in Alberta, and Lorenzo is the guy in Alberta that knows more about setting up a recycling program, I think, than anybody else. So he brings a breadth of knowledge, but he has really grabbed on to this China crisis and knows so much about this as well. He's going to give us a really good perspective. He is currently with GFL. He is GFL's Western Canadian Material Processing and Municipal Development with GFL. It's a long title, but certainly he one of the things he does is he runs the big MRF. I don't know how many of you have been at the big West Edmonton MRF, but that's Lorenzo's facility, and so he knows a lot of it from the processing side as well. So Lorenzo's going to talk to us now about her perspective on the China situation. This does work.
Well, thank you very much for that very generous introduction, Christina. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I know there's many in the audience that are clients of ours and that we service. We think this really is a pivotal moment. Thank you very much, Tom, for that great introduction of some of the concepts and things that are going on right now and where some of this historically may have come from. I want to talk on that note about a little bit of the context. This is from my perspective in the industry over the last roughly 14 years. In that time, me and my business partner, Tamara, built Evergreen Ecological Services. We built it up to processing about 2,500 metric tons of commingled recycling a month, which is pretty good, considering that's through the slow acquisition of almost 100 municipal contracts throughout the province. So it was, piece by piece, brick by brick, my citizens, brick by brick. That's how we built Rome, right? So National Sword I wanted to speak about because this really was the first time we had to deeply consider the long-term perspective of recycling and its sustainability, which previous to that we had perhaps a little bit naively just assumed, being as young as we are, everything's shiny and good and this will always go on. So I want to start by talking about Green Fence and then how that moved into National Sword and the current trends of National Sword. So Green Fence was implemented in February of 2013 officially, but it really came on the back of legislation that was made in China and back in 2007 and 2011. So softly, the Chinese had been taking some steps to sort of put on notice the world community, if you will, that what was going on was not really acceptable. If you actually read some of that legislation, I have copious notes on this, which I'm very happy to share, internet keyword searches and giving you the whole 9 yards, so you can certainly reproduce the research that I've done. I'm very happy to provide that to anyone who'd like it. But if you actually go into some of that legislation, it's quite strict. There's certain plastics that are in fact totally banned. The contamination level is set at 1.5%, which anyone who's with experience in the industry understands is a far reduction from the reality of what was occurring. So those things happened in 2007, 2011, and Green Fence became the first time that China in any real way attempted to impose those restrictions. So that evolution now comes onto the stage today, a further enhancement, tightening of regulations and enforcement of regulations with National Sword and then Blue Sky. So we have to understand these things as a continuing narrative, continually refining and narrowing and enforcing the scope of what's acceptable. One of the things that came out of Green Fence was sort of a general acknowledgement in the North American market of some best practices. One of those was that really glass and a lot of low-grade plastics were best left out of recycling programs. And following Green Fence, a lot of national level programs in the US and large municipal programs in Canada started to follow suit. And you started to see something that was wholly different in recycling, like the idea that glass, which of itself is a highly recyclable item. Very straightforward to recycle glass, but economically very difficult because the virgin material is so widely distributed and so cheap. So this was a turning point in the sense that North America, from this sort of supply side, let's just collect it all and find a way and, darn it, we'll find a way to make the recycling work after the fact. This was the first step of sort of a tacit understanding that, oh, okay, there are economic realities here. And it was a tiny movement, but it was some level of acknowledgement that you had to really consider the viability and sustainability of where this material was actually ending up. So under Green Fence, 70% of containers were subject to what they called enhanced controls. There's about 1,500 sea cans that are hauled from North America back to China on a backhaul. That's an interesting economic relationship to understand. China is a mass manufacturer within the world, especially in North America. There's a lot of sea cans that come overseas from China. And then those sea cans, if anyone's familiar with freight or shipping or logistics, understands, well, it's one thing to get an item from point A to point B, but then how do you get that shipping vessel, container, truck, etc., back from B back to A to be reloaded? At some point it has to be serviced, has to come back to terminal. It has to go back to A to reload with the next allotment or shipment that needs to be dispatched. So backhauls become incredibly important. So what was China to do with this mass amount of sea cans that need to be backhauled? A lot of Chinese companies involved in the shipping industry, a lot of North American companies involved in the shipping industry. So one of the things that sort of fit in there very well was, well, we're going to bring a bunch of manufactured goods. Because we do manufacture so many goods, we have an incredible appetite for raw materials. So let's fill these sea cans with raw material and bring them back on a backhaul. So that became very economically advantageous to companies in China that were reprocessing that material. And this also served to increase the appetite for these materials from North America. Oh, thank you. That's much easier. One of the realities of Green Fence, and if you go to the legislation in 2007, 2011, as I mentioned, was that it actually says plastics 6, 7, and 3 are banned from China. Not something to really contend with. That is probably not within the popular understanding of recycling programs here. There are many niche markets, and I'll let others who are, much greater authorities in plastics recycling than me speak to this later. But the general consensus, and if you look at the literature, is that there is no capacity anywhere in the world to recycle those plastics, 3, 6, and 7. The virgin material is far too cheap, far too widely distributed, just like glass, and there's no, even in China, with the economic advantages they have with cheap labor, there is no capacity to handle the world's supply of those plastics, and there hasn't been for many years. So the reality of what happens in China with those plastics is the furthest thing from recycling. It's actually the worst possible end result, end-of-life use, and then they get burned. Not even for energy, but oftentimes just out in landfills or out in next to the plant that's accepting the plastic bales. I'll speak a little more about that later. Despite these difficulties, China has been attempting to grapple with it. They have built 12 such zones, massive industrial areas, where they enhance the water, wastewater, solid waste disposal, treatment capabilities within those zones. And they try now for businesses to be relocated into those zones to try to contend with some of the lack of infrastructure to deal with the residual materials that come in along with importing all these recyclables. But there's a general consensus that the goals of Green Fence were as much environmental as they were economic. A lot of the world is externalizing a lot of these materials picked up in things like commingled programs, difficult materials. It's being externalized onto China, and then it's out of sight, out of mind. But that creates a huge cost and environmental problem for Chinese manufacturers to deal with. So the China Scrap Plastic Association executive president said himself, while plastic recycling can sometimes be one of the industries responsible for pollution, the government's intention is to crack down on all recycling operations without proper controls and facilities. This policy will become a new normal for China in the future. So that's stated very bluntly. China registered several trade notifications with the World Trade Organization citing protection of human health or safety, protection of animal or plant life or health, protection of the environment. So at least officially, a lot of this is being done on the auspices of environmental controls. Now, one narrative, and there are always competing narratives to try to understand what is actually going on in China. One narrative, more cynically, is that, well, when you post these sorts of notices, if you do it from sort of a protectionistic standpoint, you get a lot of pushback. But to do it from more the auspices of environmental causes in the world community gets much more support. So there's one thought process that the real goals here are economic, not environmental. I think it's probably multifactorial, and there are many reasons, and I take more of a plain sense reading of some of the motives for this. So to take Wenan as an example, this was an area that was known for its peach orchards, rolling green hills. And now, it's being described as a dead zone where nothing grows. The grass doesn't grow, the trees don't have leaves on them. It's sort of like, if you can imagine the Shire in Lord of the Rings becoming like Mordor. So this is sort of the level of what we're talking about here. And Wenan is home to roughly 60,000 small-scale family-owned workshops. So you have to understand, the quote is, Wenan isn't just the heart of northern China's scrap plastics industry, it is the Chinese scrap plastics industry. And the Chinese scrap plastic industry is the world's scrap plastic industry. So this is the beating heart of it. Mordor. Here's plastic smog around Wenan. There's plastics being burnt right next to a river. This is not a landfill. This is just a field. This is plastics polluting a river. It's easy to take the worst shots, but again, I provide the literature search. There's plentiful. These aren't token in any sense. This plastics polluting a local stream. Any of us in any of our communities, if we saw this for even 1 minute out in a residential area in urban countryside, Strathcona's home to a beautiful urban area, a lot of acreages and farmsteads, this wouldn't be tolerated for even a second. How it got started in Wenan? Someone started doing it, explains one local. He made money, so more people did it. The government saw it as a good source of tax revenue and encouraged the industry. It was random. Not planned for, no infrastructure, just growing exponentially in an environment that doesn't have the capacity to deal with the unintended consequences. There's no safety equipment, no respirators, hard hats, or steel-toed boots. Plastic bales are broken open, the plastics are sorted by hand, the plastics are moved onto tarps in the sun, and then they're doused with solvents, with nothing but a tarp protecting it from the groundwater. Then the tarps are rolled up, as much of the liquid is recaptured to be reused, and what's not captured is then transported just outside town and dumped in the earth. Again, I can provide you the literature search so you can see the reality that this is not just a claim, this is how it's conducted. No safety equipment. Then those sorted plastics are sheared into flakes and they're poured into extruders by hand with no respirators, often in enclosed spaces, because you have to control temperature. You can't have rain. You can't forego a day of production if the weather's not good. So you've got enclosed areas with improper ventilation, with no one wearing ventilation, breathing in plastics. So let's just take a minute and understand that. Here's children with respiratory disease at a local hospital. Respiratory disease has increased 60% in recent years with no increase in the smoking rate. It's being diagnosed in younger and younger ages and amongst many, many ailments. So the unofficial word, there's the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, to its credit, has a billboard that actually cites the reality of the environmental situation, especially local smog levels. And this has been a great deal of consternation to the local Chinese government, which produces and distributes very different statistics. But the Chinese local population, highways are shut down due to low visibility, school is closed for days, and it's generally accepted that to go outside is totally unsafe. All the higher-ranking Chinese officials that can afford it have very, very high-end air purification systems in their homes, something the European manufacturers, to their credit, have been very vocal about disseminating to the local Chinese population. Sort of the hypocrisy of it. So the U.S. Embassy, through that activity, was able to slowly break down the propagandist machine, and the Chinese government adopted a new standard that was more realistic of reporting how bad the pollution actually was. So these sorts of activities, another thing that the U.S. Embassy there does post is that to many World Health officials, if the worst city in North America for smog and poor air quality, Los Angeles, and Beijing's levels are about here, and Los Angeles's are about there. If you could get Beijing down to just the level of the worst North American city of Los Angeles, it would almost immediately add 5 years of life to every living citizen in Beijing. 5 years. That's like the life expectancy of quitting, of increased life expectancy of a smoker quitting smoking. That's an incredibly toxic environment. So Environment Canada, the problem with burning plastics is you generate dioxins, which has been called the most single carcinogenic substance to ever be tested in a laboratory. Prime way it's generated in our environment is through the burning of plastics, and it's persistent. It builds up in the food chain, and it takes many decades. So there's a background level of dioxins in this world that is always slowly creeping up and rising. And if it rises to levels in an area that are toxic, you're now living with that potentially for a couple of generations if you stopped today. So it's a particularly salient point. I'll use the example of Ukraine, where if you actually look at the radioactive load in a person, you can actually tell how close to Chernobyl they were born in the world. That's a fact. That's part of the way that John Does and international waters are identified. Well, how close to Ukraine and Chernobyl were they born? Well, let's check how much radioactive load they have in their body, in their hair, and their skin, and nails. Environmental Protection Agency, burning plastics in particular, generates high amounts of dioxins, amongst many other industrial activities. So Chinese citizens have stormed government offices, refused work, and consistently pressured the Chinese government regarding environmental matters. It's a major issue of legitimacy for the Chinese government. Chinese has surpassed the United States, become the world's largest trash producer, 260 million tons a year. And to deal with that, they don't have the space for the landfills. The landfills are poorly run, and building a proper landfill is actually quite a feat of engineering, and it's not cheap. So they're building incinerators that are allowed 10 times the level of release of contaminants as the European counterpart incinerators. Chinese suffers from a long list of environmental issues: illegal landfills, leaded wastes, plastic bag pollution called white pollution, the use of human excrement as fertilizer, night soil, no recycling for batteries, mercury release, etc. The continued use of DDT. I think that was banned here in the 70s. Huge disruption, bankruptcies in 2008, recession further impeding the progress, and much of what was slowly being built at that time was then lost and hasn't been restored yet. Unsanitary sorting of materials in landfills next to heavy operating equipment. A lot of landfill deaths there due to being crushed because you're sorting out materials right next to a landfill compactor for the illegal and crop up landfills that do exist. So the current trends, green fence, the prior legislation of 2007-2011 is rolled into green fence, which is rolling into blue sky. Into National Sword, which in turn in 2018 is rolling into Blue Sky. Blue Sky is focused more tightly on smuggling, circumvention, and illegal imports of scrap. 2017, 866,000 metric tons of material was seized. 80% of the inspected materials under Blue Sky being plastic. It's not by accident. It will run from March 1st to December 31st this year. It's also targeting other commodities like OCC now. And that's having impending results in the OCC market now. 7,000 metric tons of Russian smuggled paper have already been seized. Here it sounds bizarre to us, but there's a huge illicit and illegal trade, and now in high contamination materials being legally smuggled in, trying to avoid all of this. The China Plastics Processing Industry Association has said Guangdong province and other areas have been seriously affected, so their own mills and infrastructure, the viability of their own businesses, seriously affected with survival challenges. And yet the restrictions only seem to be increasing. So closing words, unfortunately, things seem to go from bad to worse in the industry due to the curse of China, as mixed paper prices, which really are irrelevant right now, and movement, the bigger issue right now, just even being able to ship out your material, are sinking ever lower. New export markets for paper are starting to fill up, as well as also becoming concerned with quality. So if China's leading the way, why would anyone else sabotage that? Great, it's finally getting cleaned up. Any sort of domestic use by some corrugated mills, which was minimal at best, has also petered off as what was once a viable substitute additive to the high OCC prices, which are coming down and aren't so high anymore, isn't so much anymore and thus have scaled back usage. And the drop this month on OCC sounds like could further decline in April. So nothing good at all to report, sorry. That's from a national level Ontario broker. So in conclusion, I think if we understand the trend in China, we shouldn't just cynically understand it through some sort of global power play. We also have to understand the environmental concerns and the roots and the citizens of China's push for this. And what role do we play in having, blindly, out of sight, out of mind, ship this material over there so it can be burned in a field? Not to be too dramatic, but what role did we all play in that? So maybe it's time for the industry as a whole. I especially point to one thing Tom said about the demand-pull economics. That has, when he started to speak to me about these things years ago, it turned on my head because I was myself very guilty of the supply side. More tons, many tons, as much as we can do, force it in there, someone will figure out what to do with it. Someone doesn't always figure out what to do with it, or if they do figure it out, it's not what you want. The idea that you actually go from a demand-pull, from a rooted, functional, marketplace, viable approach, and you pull out the materials that actually have value and sustainability, that's a previous generation's approach than mine, which I think was much more realistic. So, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Lorenzo. Come sit down by Tom, and we'll just take a couple questions with the two of you together, because I think the two presentations really went well together. So, any questions that have been prompted by the first two presenters about Chinese sword? Questions? We have microphones. Yep, here's one over here.
So, hello, my name is Joe with the Foothills Regional Services Commission. Question, I've got 3 different communities all looking right now at going to Blue Cart single stream collection that we service. So what would be your advice to, I guess, town councillors or whoever it might be that are making these decisions at this point? What would you counsel them as far as to do with their recycling programs at this stage?
Well, the first thing I point out is that Blue Cart programs are notorious for providing a vehicle in which residents can hide their stuff. Are there waste restrictions next to this program trying to increase the recycling rate? Because now you're given the optimum vehicle. When it all doesn't fit in the black cart, we'll throw it in the blue cart. The collection trucks are very problematic for the operator trying to catch. At best, it's already hit his hopper, and he would, in a very unsafe manner, have to climb into the truck to pull it out, and that's not something we want to do. So you have to have a very rational, realistic perspective of how you're going to contend with the mass contamination that you are going to see in the Blue Cart program. So the bulwark, I would say to that, is a couple of steps. First, be very strict on your acceptable item lists. Be crystal clear. Use graphics. Make sure people truly understand what's to go in and what isn't. And be specific. The second thing is just budget now. 2 or 3 times a year, you're going to go out, you're going to hire a mathematician who's going to tell you the statistically significant sample size to have the impact amongst whatever percentage, 90% of the population you want to have, and understand that's how many carts you're going to go out, and you're going to put a street team on foot out, flipping lids in front of the trucks, digging in, dumpster diving in those blue carts, and they're going to sticker those, they're going to reject that material back to the resident, so the resident's held accountable, and now when they come home from work, oh, my cart wasn't, what a headache. He's dumping over his cart in the driveway. He's picking out what wasn't allowed. He's calling the town and getting pissed off. And you go through that. And your counselors, make sure this isn't an election year. Your counselors are going to have the fortitude that they're going to be willing for that. If you take those steps, and if you do not let your foot off the gas, and you continue that through every single year of the program, forever and ever going forward, and other things you do, like there's a lot of turnover in communities, for instance, in Alberta. 20%, or as much as 20% of your residents are actually new to the community each year. So that means in 5 years, the real math isn't quite that dramatic, but there's an immense turnover. So who's educating the new residents as well? You have to buttress your approach with these things. And it has to be just a consistent, ongoing basis. Utilize the school system, the education of the kids, because then the kids bring it home to the parent. It's, Mom and Dad, that's not recyclable. and be frank with people. A lot of what is upsetting the apple cart and frankly contaminating the stream, even amongst acceptable item lists, it's a small minority of material. It's 10 to 15% of the material ruining the marketability of the lion's share of 85 to 90%. So is it going to be rigid molded screw top lids, only grade 1 and 2? That's a sustainable, viable market of plastics, in my opinion. And there's much greater experts than me today that can speak to that. But outside of certain niche areas, like on a large mass scale, those plastics have proven themselves viable. Have the others? It's a big question mark for me and many others, but there are, as I defer to greater experts than myself in the room on that.
Thanks. Tom, do you want to add a comment to that?
No, not at all.
Okay. We're actually going to just hold questions there because we're going to move right on to the next group of presenters. So if the domestic market presenters can come up to the front, please, and sit down. Thank you so much, both of you. And you'll be back. You'll both be back. Thanks. Okay. Oh, you brought props. Good. No, you can have this chair. Do you want to speak with the mic or do you want to do the podium? I'll go to the podium. Okay. And you guys can see, I'll turn the screen so you can actually see it. Okay. We are going to go on to Al Mataro. Al is Executive Vice President and CEO of Cascades Recovery. And I insist on pronouncing it that way just because I like to pretend that we're not in the West. So what I love the best about Al's bio is it's a really cool story because it's all started with him and his brother essentially starting a recycling business in the back of a pickup truck. And how cool is that? They started in a pickup truck and he now operates a huge company that has a procurement of 2 million tons of market-ready fiber for use by their mills. And they also market a lot of market-ready materials. And he's going to be speaking from that perspective in terms of he has a very good knowledge of the domestic industry as well as marketing materials overseas as well. So he is leading the company's Recovery Plus program, and it's all about taking materials out of landfill. So I'll turn it over to you, Al, if you want to come up.
Thanks very much, Christine. And Lorenzo, thanks very much for that description of what's actually happening in China. You know, it's been a tough ride over the last 8 months for all of us, because I don't think we really truly understand what was driving this. And I think, Lorenzo, you really nailed it, because it's taken me a good 4 months to believe and truly understand what's behind all of this. And you know, it's a difficult time because it's happened so quickly. As Tom said, if we had 5 years in the making, it would be a little bit different. But this is like an overnight event. What did I do wrong? Oh, there you go. All right, so what I want to talk a little bit about, I got 10 minutes to go through this. I'm going to go real quick because I'm hoping to stimulate some conversation as we go through all this. We looked at the situation, as I said, for the last 6 months. We've been spinning our wheels trying to understand what to do and what not to do. We are a huge generator of mixed paper here in the West, so we have a very close eye on what's happening on the export market. In the East, it's not as bad right now in the mid East area, Ontario, Quebec, New York states, because a lot of the fiber that's consumed is consumed locally, particularly the OCC. So when we looked at what happened over time, it was interesting to see that this was happening. We were spinning our wheels, and more importantly, the conclusion that was drawn, particularly with curbside material, curbside fiber, was that it was basically banned from China. So, and this was once again confirmed by the federal government who held a webinar that suggested that when you look at anything generated in a household, that it is not allowed into China, period. So that doesn't matter. If your newspaper's sorted or not, it doesn't matter. The next thing that we had to look at was that basically now everything that we had generated or we're generating in North America, wait a minute, the world, now has to go to other countries that could probably, if they took it all, or all they would want to consume, is about 30% of what's available. And what got me, as I said, was OCC, because to look at plastics, we understood what was happening with plastics. I mean, we were shipping dirty material to China. There's food, it's just the way it is. But fiber has always been the golden nugget for the industry. And when OCC started to get challenged, then I really felt there was something very serious about what was going on. And if we look at this, we got to look at it at 99.5% purity is what they're looking for materials going into the country. And that's very difficult. I can tell you it's 0.5% contamination, but it doesn't hit as hard as 99.5%. And to OCC, again, 40% of what's generated in America has to go export. We can't consume it, and we don't consume it here. So this is the big picture for mixed paper. 6 million tons of fiber had to be displaced. 2 million of that from North America. That's the reality. The reality then is it's now zero. Nothing goes to China of that material. So what has this done? Well, we saw from mid-year last year for mixed paper, nothing but a decline in pricing. OCC followed same suit, but more recently over the last couple of months, as it too is now under siege, if I call it, as it enters the country. So China. Why China? What has China done? Well, China was a huge appetite for bulk materials. High tolerance rate of contamination, as Tom indicated. And probably most important of all is the fact that they provided the most competitive pricing in the marketplace. China set all the pricing. It kept it high. It kept it alive. So we have to keep that in mind, that it's all over. In effect, it's over. There's a limited capacity for mixed paper. The challenge is movement as well, but more importantly, the other markets that are available, as we know, India, South Korea, Indonesia, all these countries, and I use this word respectfully, are bottom feeders. They always bought cheap, and they never competed for price. They could get it for nothing. That was their first objective. Well, today they're getting it for nothing. And I think what's more important, and we've heard about this, as we alluded to it, somebody else was always the way we looked at it, would take care of things. And I think what else has happened right now is that we have to come to terms with the fact that fake recycling is over. So what does it mean to the recycling industry? Revenues are gone. We have movement. We can move all the tons we want to move to India right now. There's movement. Tough. It's not as fluid as it was. We're getting close. But there's no money. There's no money. You saw prices go from $105 a ton for mixed paper to minus 20 right now. That's a lost revenue. It's affecting both the private and the public sector. So when we start looking at the private sector, how many companies will be here next year at this time? Particularly now with OCC also falling in price. And we're big buyers of OCC in the East. We buy 120,000 tons a month. Do we like what's happening? To some degree. It's offsetting some of our other challenges right now in transportation and other costs that we're incurring. But we're concerned. We're concerned that price will go too low. And what are we going to end up happening is the industry going to start landfilling and incinerating that material? Are we going to lose access to all the work and all the energy that's been put into play in recovering materials and putting infrastructure in place for that? Very serious. And the public sector is no better off. Give it another couple of months when councils start to look at the budgets and start asking questions about where's the money? Where's the money? How are you going to answer that question? We've already got challenges in this whole industry with the good times or the good monies. Well, it's all gone now. So what kind of attitude or appetite are we going to have to recover materials? Very serious questions, questions that we now start to look at. Get over the fact that there's a problem in China. It's there. It's done. Accept it. Now start thinking about where we're going to go. What's the next angle? You know something else to look at? Hey, I was so high and heavy, about circular economy over the last couple of years. Hey, we're a manufacturer of packaging products as well, so we take all of this to heart. We look at it from every single angle. What's this going to do now to the mindset of EPR that's been put in place? Somebody else doesn't exist anymore that we just ship it to and it gets taken care of. So what about the true costs now? The real costs of recycling. Who's going to pay for that? Are brand owners going to want to spend all that money? Because they're complaining already about what they're spending. This will double the cost of recycling over time, what's going on right now. And we need a balance too, and this is another factor that's coming out. Let's look also at China and ask China a question that says, listen, you made all those boxes, you shipped them this way, or those products, you need to take them back. Because if they don't, we're out of balance. And a circular economy has to work on a balance. Everybody wants more paper mills in this country. And do what with the paper? Make rolls? There's no need for it. We're making enough paper right now, enough that we actually export to a great degree some of our products as well. So we have to think about that when we talk about the circular economy. Where's this all going to go? So let's get caught up in that and trying to understand how that's going to come to life. And I think this one is come to life because I've always suggested that when we go to a circular economy, it's not going to be a commodity-driven economy. It can't be. It has to be a cost-plus economy. If I make foam trays where I put meat in it, then I take my 1,000 tons of foam trays I put in the marketplace, and it needs to come back to me. I am not going to compete for that material in the open marketplace. Well, this starts to prove how come you need that sort of infrastructure as well. So a lot of things are coming out of this event right now. I think what's really important is that unlike any other time in history when we've seen a downturn, we've always risked it because we knew that in 3 months, 4 months, things actually would get better. And they have for the last 15 years. We have seen the cycles, and every single time we've had a downturn in a cycle, we've had 4 years of fantastic opportunity. I don't think that this is going to happen this time. It's not. This is a government-driven incentive. It's here to stay. So it's time now to think about the direction we need to go. So, if we look at the new reality that is coming, is that everything is coming to the surface now. Everything we've done wrong is starting to come to the surface. Oh, we didn't sort good enough. We are not doing this good enough. We need new technology. We need new this. Really? It's coming to life now. This is the reality that we're faced with. And you know what? We've been marketing crap. But you know something? We got to blame a little bit on China too, because they encouraged it as well. They did encourage it as well. We may have taken advantage of it, but they accepted the fact that we could market crap. And so what do we need to do? It's going to be going back to the basics. Source separation at the source. I think, Tom, you alluded to that. That's been, if I go back when I first started in this business, it was about sorting colored ledger, and you had to sort red with the red and the blue with the blue. It was that detail. We forgot everything about this business, and now it's going back to those basics, because it will be the survival of the fittest. And I'm going to suggest that in the next year, 18 months, we'll start to see a whole new leadership, a whole new way business is done, because it isn't about the waste management industry anymore. It's about truly recovery, recycling, downstream processing, and bringing materials back into their original state. So I'll leave you with that. I'm sure we'll have a lot more conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to call up Tony McCatchin next. Tony is with Merlin Plastics, and Merlin Plastics is who we all know as the plastic recycler in Western Canada. So he has great perspective on what the realities are domestically. I'm going to open your presentation.
Well, thank you for your introduction. I'm not going to talk to you about fiber. I know very little. I mean, you've got the best expert in fiber. I'm here to talk to you about container and plastics, and what Merlin Plastics has done in since inception in 1987 for the last 30 years to be independent of the overseas market, to build and nurture and grow our domestic market. So in 1987, we were founded in Delta, British Columbia, to process post-industrial plastics. In 1991, we expanded into post-consumer HDPE bottles, natural and colored. In 1992, we went into processing and recycling HDPE pail and buckets. In 1995, we started processing post-consumer film. In 2000, we started a plant in Alberta called Merlin Plastics Alberta to recycle PET beverage container. In 2004, we obtained a patent on our process, a unique process. In 2006, we moved where historically recycled plastics was going into non-food application. We were able to obtain an FDA approval so we can go after high-end application back into food. In 2009, we built a plant in California to recycle PET beverage container, and we obtained the largest grant in the state of California that was ever given to a recycler. In 2010, we obtained an FDA approval for our PET pallet for food contact. In 2014, we invested in Oregon to recycle PET beverage container in partnership with the Beverage Container of Oregon. In 2015, we built a state-of-the-art container sorting plant to recycle the containers that is being collected in British Columbia. This was driven basically by thanks to our partner Mterra and Cascade for allowing us, giving us this opportunity to do this job. In 2016, we acquired assets of Anthropex in Sarnia and upgraded and redesigned the sorting, washing, and processing system. And the plant is currently processing 3 to 7 or 1 to 7. So what are the challenges in plastics? Oops, sorry, I should have moved this. Oops. Okay. Oops, sorry. So what are the challenges in sorting in containers? It's economically challenging due to high capital cost and significant operating cost. To build a sorting plant is not, it's serious investment. And to make this investment, I mean, we cannot get the money unless we have the feedstock and unless we have commitment from our supplier. And this commitment can be one day on, one day off. Luckily, we had partners that believed in building a sustainable market domestically and had given us the volume that is required to build this plant, which we end up doing. It's demanding, it's require highly trained staff. It uses different technology, mechanical, optical, to separate all those grades. You know, in one hand, it's a we're providing a service. In another hand, which is sorting all those recyclable product. In another hand, it's we're facing commodity. So commodity prices fluctuate. We're competing with oil-based product. So we have commodity going up and down, and yet the cost to run and sort and service the community are fixed. So those are the challenges that we are facing. So if we truly wish to work towards the goal of a true circular economy, like Al mentioned, then I believe it can only be successful if the right policy are in place. Policy would be enacted to reward and recognize the carrot and stick method. So if somebody is using a circular package, it's got to have some kind of an incentive. We know that voluntary circular concept only works when oil prices are at $200 a barrel. And when they drop to $50, I mean, this concept disappears. So to make the circular economy a reality, I submit that we have all a role to play. The end-of-life packaging reusable cycle requires the cooperation of government, brand owner, and the recycling industry. Brand owner would efficiently design their product for recyclability and the circular package life cycle. Government would establish policy to reward and promote the circular economy concept. Curbside recycling depot and downstream processor would acquire the knowledge, skill, infrastructure that are needed to do this job. everyone in this chain would work cooperatively for all to benefit. Again, in looking at the future, there are going to be a lot of overcapacity with the shale gas and lots of chemical company investing in non-renewable resources. So we're facing this, and we're very well aware of it. And yet, our community are expecting us to recycle day in and day out, regardless of how many gallon of oil are mined from the ground, and regardless of what oil prices is. So one thing that probably could be considered in our case, government could consider, is the carbon footprint of oil-based virgin resin is significantly higher than the carbon footprint of the same volume of recycled material. I mean, there are more than just the price. There are the environmental cost of mining an oil-based polymer versus recycling polymer, and this is not yet priced in the package. Recycling market has challenges, difficulty when there is oversupply of oil-based resin in one hand, and no recognition for low carbon in another hand. So for the circularity to work, we need good policy, we need responsible brand owners, we need a vibrant recycling industry. Everybody has a role to play. And, no fake at any level, no fake at brand owner level, at government level, and at municipal and recycling level. We all have a role to play, and we should take it seriously and do it. The job can be done. This is not going to the moon. Product can be sorted. It's just, it does require effort and money, and we have to apply our knowledge and apply it seriously. I mean, that's all I have to say.
That was fantastic. So now you've really heard from the big players, the big domestic players, and now we're going to move on to some of the more local companies. I thought this would be really interesting to talk to some of those that are actually directly consuming the materials here. So we're going to start with Carl's Teamstra, and he actually represents, and I'm going to switch your presentation on, he actually represents one of the few real recycling companies in Edmonton. So Carl's company has actually made insulation out of newspaper for how many years now, Carl? A lot of them. Since 1976. And I think a lot of you have probably heard of them. But Carl's going to tell us all about them anyway and tell us the realities and the challenges that he's faced.
Thank you, Christina. It was interesting listening to the first few speakers, especially Tom Lorenzo, to hear how things have gone. There was the push more towards commingled and how it has affected us over the years. We had started out in 1976 as an insulation manufacturer, and as things went on, we had ended up starting another company called Allied Paper Savers, and that was strictly to source paper to help us make product, because one of the biggest problems we have in our industry and other insulation manufacturers like us is sourcing clean enough paper. Some of the issues that you have going forward is damage to your equipment, which can cause fires. All of these issues, contaminants, which would cause customers to complain because your product isn't clean enough, that it causes damage to their equipment as well. All of these issues are due to the contamination in the material. Allied Paper Savers has been sourcing, collecting recycled newsprint in Alberta and beyond for over 35 years now. Because of the issues in contamination, in order to find clean enough paper, sometimes we bring paper from brokers or other municipalities as far away as Winnipeg or Vancouver. Allied Paper Savers is a primary supplier to Cancel Industries, which has manufactured Weather Shield insulation since 1976. It's made 85% recycled newsprint right here in Edmonton, Alberta. Another product we manufacture is hydroseeding mulch. which is used to grow grass. Could be parks, roadways, various uses for that as well. Here's an example of a fire we just had in our plant, and this would have happened in the last month, this picture. And what would have caused that fire is metal contaminated in the paper, and some of the issues is when the paper is collected and then it's baled, it's very difficult to get the metal back out of it. We can use magnets and screens, and one of the things we had done is in 2003 at Allied, we put in a sort line at our facility to try remove extra contaminants. So all the paper that we're getting in, we're running an extra sort on it at our facility to get it clean enough so that we can use it. Another picture of just damaged metal would get into a mill, and that would be a fan that's used to move material. Well, if you get metal or contaminants in there, it just damages equipment and costs a lot of money. It can be very expensive. Allied, we try to focus only on material that meets the ISRI specifications for newsprint, which is one of the things now at less than 1%. It's difficult to meet. This is just showing the type of newsprint that we're looking for. We look for clean, dry newsprint, preferably source separated. We have worked with some MRFs, but it has to be very, very clean in order to get us to be able to use it and make a product out of it. Other non-newsprint fiber must be under 10%, but again, that's something that we use our sort line to filter out some of the contaminants. But in general, the cellulose insulation industry, most manufacturers, and this goes whether they're in Canada or the United States or even in Europe, getting clean paper is one of the most difficult parts of our business. Every truckload of insulation that is sold, we save roughly 14 tons of newsprint, or we recycle 14 tons of newsprint. So it is an end use that you're taking the paper and putting it into an end product that would save energy and gives it an actual use for the recycled paper. Again, WeatherShield is a closed-loop solution that we were actually the first product in Canada that to carry the Environment Canada's eco logo. So again, it's a short presentation, but just wanted to get across the point of the difficulty we have when there's too many contaminants, and we've seen an issue of it over time since as things got more collected with the recycling China accepting more and more contaminants, it's been harder and harder to make a product or use the end materials. Okay.
Thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, we're going to call out Grant Harrington. Grant's one of the few people that's been in this business as long as I have, actually longer. So Grant is a plastic recycler out of Lethbridge. I think he was referenced, actually Tammy referenced him at the beginning. So Grant's going to just talk a little bit about some of his challenges and opportunities, and then we're going to have some questions for the group.
Thank you, Christina. Well, after listening to Tony and Al, I've thrown out my bloody presentation. Because currently, we ship 3 truckloads of product a month into the United States. Last year, we sent 1 truckload into Colombia, 1 into Brazil, and the rest went into the States. We don't ship 5% into the current local market. And the reason we don't, to this point, is because the cities like Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, Red Deer, Calgary, they haven't stepped up to the fore to be part of the solution. It's always been looked after over the years by somebody else. It's always gone to China or somewhere else. Now, we're not there to solve their problems. They're going to have to help us. Just to give you a little background on what I do, WestCan Marketing is the parent for Alternative Plastic Products, which has a plant just outside of Lethbridge. Now, WestCan started the whole collection and baling operation in the southern Alberta. And then we migrated mainly into manufacturing. So for the past 5 years, we've actually been in business 18 years, but for the past 5 years, we've been trying to develop local markets. And an example is that right sitting down in front of you there, we've been working on this baby. This is having my baby. We've been working on this. This is part of the rig mat industry. We've been working on this. This is the 4th generation of trying to get this into that market. And so we finally developed a product that'll go into that market, but then you got to work on getting the cost down to a point where it's sustainable. So then that's made out of 100% film or linear low density polyethylene. And then why did we do that? Because we can go out and ask all the people collecting film, grocery bags or whatever, to pay us $200 a ton to take it. You pay us $200, then we can take that money and reduce the price to get this into a market that can use thousands of kilograms of plastic. And that's what we need. We're not going to solve our problem with 4x4s for parking benches because there's only so many of those you can do. You have to have a sustainable market of some sort that can use up plastic. Now, why hasn't our local market worked out? Well, our product isn't pretty. Our product is more expensive than wood. For instance, you take a 4x4-inch by 84-inch post. For us to make that post into, make recycled plastic into that post, we have to sell a post for $12. You can go into UFA tomorrow and buy a wood one for $6. And the people that buy those bloody posts don't care because it's their grandson that's got to look after it. Right? He can go out and repair it. We don't care. So the markets have been really hard to develop over the years. Now, there are other things out there. I was down, and Tony was, and probably a few of you out there, went to Nashville to the recycling conference. And there's things coming up that'll help and help us out of this whole problem. But we need social conscience. We need the cities to step up. If I was to build 150 miles, just tell you how many kilometers that is, or whatever, 200 and something, that would be 99,000 fence posts we would make. That would be enough plastic to max out one of our extruders. That would be all the post-consumer plastic the Red Deer, Lethbridge, and Medicine Hat generates for a full year. So how do we get that whole mindset to come together for the Alberta government, for the cities, or for instance, Medicine Hat, order 1,000 barrier posts for your parks. Well, we can't because it's $5 more than wood. What? How does that make sense? Well, it doesn't. So all I'm saying, in conclusion, and I got to say something about in conclusion. I had a friend that always says, Grant, I always learned how to wake up when I heard the word in conclusion. So hopefully some of you have woken up now. Thank you, but anyway, that's where we are with our little plant down in southern Alberta.
Thank you, Grant. Okay, I think that gives us some nice local perspective. So now while these four fine gentlemen are up here, let's take a couple questions. Just put your hand up so we can get to you with the mic. You know, especially around the whole issue of domestic markets and how domestic markets can really be a key part of the solution. But you might have other questions too, specifically around their manufacturing process. Okay, Sharon, here. Just take mine.
Okay, a question about number one, PET. So the city of Calgary has a lot of PET, as some people might know, and we're not talking about screw top bottle PET or beverage container PET. We're talking about clamshell style PET or berries or lettuce, that sort of thing. Tony or anyone, any thoughts on PET and where we're headed for that market, or any supply or any demand that might be out there for that material? We've been unable to market PET for well over a year now, and we are eagerly anticipating any changes that may come here. You spoke a lot about number 3 through 7 and the challenges there, and Lorenzo mentioned some of the export issues as well around that material. But we've consistently talked about 1 and 2 already having a solution and that it's highly recyclable. But we're not seeing that, truly.
Yeah, so you're saying not all the ones. So what do you think, Tony? What about all the ones?
Yeah, I mean, so number 1 is a very recycled product. But when you look at the package, so when you're looking at clamshell, I believe you're talking about, the reason it's not being recycled, this has more to do with the glue and label than it has to do with the package itself. Plus there could be issue with lamination in it. So if it's a pure PET, it definitely can be recycled. And just the state of California has passed probably 3 months ago, a law saying that if it is a laminated, it cannot be called number 1. It should be called number 7. So there's a lot of number 1s that are they number 1?
Is that what we need then, greater regulation around this?
I mean, again, design for recyclability will go a long way. And if a brand owner if there is a brand owner are required to design their product to be recycled and to be compatible with current infrastructure, recycling infrastructure, it will be done. So having a clamshell that is fully recycled is not mission impossible. It is possible, but it requires more than Al to collect it and Tony to collect it, or it has to start right from the ground up, right from the design. So it is something that can be done. But question is, if I'm a brand owner today and I have a glue that is very cheap and paper labels that I can stick anywhere, even if it cannot be removed, why would I not do it? My package would be cheaper than using a product that is a label that is recyclable and a glue that is dissolvable in water. But why would I do it? When we ask them, they say to us, when we ask the brand owners, they tell us, look, we have, what do they say? We have fiduciary duty. We say, I have fiduciary duty too, and municipality have fiduciary duty too. But again, I mean, their fiduciary duty will be, they will be able to take it into consideration if they are required to do it. There are solutions. But again, it's beyond Tony and...
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. Excellent. Can we have one more question, maybe? Oh, sorry.
I'm learning a lot today. Are we talking federal, provincial, or municipal policies? Or all 3 levels?
David, would you mind introducing yourself?
I'm David Swan. I'm MLA for Calgary Mountain View, a keen recycler, and I was certainly caught off guard, as many were, to learn of things that were not as they seemed to be across the world. So where does the leadership need to start, I guess? Federal, provincial, municipal, or all of the above to get the regulations and policies around EPR, I guess, would be the broader sense.
Who wants to take that on first, Al or Grant? Carl? No, it's not there's no Christina questions here today.
I'll try, just as personal opinions. We always suggest government has to play a big role in helping recycling and activity to take place. When we look at the role that they should play is to put the rules in place for the industry to have a level playing field, so that, as Tony said, if you can't use a paper label with glue, then it should be stated as that as a rule. And then let the industry work its way around that. It might even go further than that. And you know, if we look at the circular economy and concepts behind that, suggest that, you know, if you make the product, don't worry about the front side of it, which is the consumer, the collection, the processor, and making a bale. Go backwards and ask yourself, if you took what you just made, can you turn it back into the resin that it started with without any problem? Because if you can do that, then everything is taken care of, because rest assured that there'll be somebody out there that will take care of collecting that material and bringing it back. So I think government has to play a role. It has to play a role understanding that that's what's needed, is a downstream focus, so that we have, as Tom alluded to, the market for the material. There's a need for it, therefore we're going to go. But we need a need that forces the person making it or the producer that makes it to realize what Tony's challenges are, or the challenges are, personally or themselves.
Thank you. Grant has a comment.
I personally think it has to come from the bottom up. In other words, if you take a city such as Red Deer or Lethbridge, they have to make the decisions that helps their program, and then forces the different levels of government above them to look at it. For instance, there's been cities in the States that said, okay, no more film. No more film. We're not going to allow any more film in this city. And the cities can do that. If you can get your council to take on the actual problem and say, okay, no more. We're not going to receive this. We're not going to do that. We're not going to kowtow to anybody that tells us what we have to take and force all the expense onto our consumer. There's no way. So there are things that can be done on the bottom, and it'll force to the top.
Thanks, Grant. I wonder, just to wrap this, Tony, because you come from BC and you are processing all the containers in BC from the EPR program, have you seen any impacts yet in terms of anything changing as a result of the producers being responsible?
I mean, like every system, it has a positive and a negative, but we have at least a loop system where we can communicate to an organization that represents the brand owner about challenges. And the first thing you need is to have a communication and with an organization that can speak to brand owner and say, look, you know, maybe they can. I mean, I don't speak for those organizations, so but if you have an organization that can speak, that can have true data from the recycler and can communicate those information to the brand owner, can say, look, if your product is not recyclable and is causing disruptive to the recycling infrastructure, we may have to stop collecting it in a blue box. We cannot keep taking it in the blue box. You know, they do have, you know, they can, you know, they can definitely have a communication with the brand owner and start the communication. And the first thing is to identify it. The second step is to solve it. But if you don't identify it, it's never going to be solved. If you keep telling, the city of Calgary or wherever, this is a great package, and then, you know, it's not going anywhere, and the city of Calgary keep collecting it, it's, you know, the problem is not going to be solved unless it's being properly raised up.
Thank you very much. Carl, can you just leave us with a 10-second soundbite on what you would change in the collection systems to deal with your issue of the contamination?
This is obviously a very biased opinion because we've been in this business for a long time, but if I was to change it, I would move more towards source separation, and it's easier for us to use the product at that point.
And I did ask you to come, so.
Yeah, this is not a bias, because I've been in this business for 30 years, and I keep hearing the paper industry complaining about glass, and in their papers, they don't want to see glass in the paper. The plastics industry complaining about glass and dirt and sand. And we all know that single stream, when you throw all this in and compact them very well, you know, it does cause this contamination. I mean, it still, you know, baffles me to no end, you know, how this industry went in. I mean, first thing you learn in a business school is see what your customer wants. And all the customers, the paper mill, North American paper mill, plastics recycler, they always don't like single stream, and yet every program is single stream. Because the tracking company, you know, because the collector wants, you know, if waste management likes single stream, everybody follows. I mean, where is, I mean, municipalities, you know, again, they could have been, I wouldn't say that, we all have a role to play, and it's not out of sight, out of mind. I was I was buying material from Boeing in Seattle, and before they sell me anything, they went into my facility, investigated the water, that I have right permit to discharge my water, the air permit, everything before they sell me. So, I mean, proper investigation has to be done to make sure that the downstream market exists before we go in and jump into start collecting something that may or may not be recycled. And you know, I wouldn't say the municipalities only, but brokers also, Tom, I hate to say it, but brokers are responsible too, because they were the one going there saying, hey, you know what, you can put shoes in a blue box, I can take it because somebody in China can take it. You guys are responsible for not having any domestic market here.
Okay, and on that note, you'll get a ton of chance, yes. Thank you so much to all of you. That was fantastic. So now we're going to move on to our next presenter, who is Mark Badger. He is Executive Vice President with Canada Fibers. And I think some of you have probably heard Mark. He's been on CBC for sure at least a couple times, and some of the other news networks as well. What I didn't know about him is you used to be CEO of the Canadian Plastics Industry Association. I don't know how I didn't know that. Did you know that, Tammy? See, she didn't even know it. So anyway, Mark brings, and you should see all the companies that he's worked with that are not even necessarily recycling related, but he brings a lot of strong business sense. So we are going to hear from Mark on his perspective. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Christina. I got to tell you right off the bat, this is like a gigantic group therapy session. There is so much honesty in this room today that is just long overdue, and it reminds me of a couple of movies. The first one, The Wizard of Oz. Remember when Dorothy landed in the house with Toto, and she gets out of the house and she says, Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore. Well, you know, there's been a lot of discussion here today and a lot of epiphanies with respect to the world has changed, and we too must change with it. The other movie I really need your help with, it was 1980s, maybe 1990s, and there was a guy at a window, and he would yell out of the window, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. What was the name of that movie? Network. There you go. It was like cathartic. He was mad as hell and he wasn't going to take it anymore. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do at Canada Fibers and the Urban Resource Group of companies. Then I'm going to go into kind of what we're finding in domestic and international markets today. And then I'm going to tell you about a three-part plan that we're working on to make our world a better place, make the world of our customers, the municipalities a better place, and yes, Lorenzo, to truly make the world a better place. Al recognized Lorenzo. I'm going to recognize him as well. I'm going to recognize him for being just the kind of person with just the kind of honesty that this industry needs to flourish and move ahead. All the speakers were great, but Lorenzo, you really stand out and you've got a very bright future ahead of you. So at Canada Fibers and the Urban Resource Group of companies, we kind of start at the top of the wheel. We like to think of ourselves as providing circular solutions to our customers. We provide curbside haulage services for residential customers. We do haulage services for the ICI business, industrial, commercial, institutional business. We also provide consulting and audit services for many of our institutional customers, like educational facilities and like shopping malls. The heart of our organization is MRFs. We're in the MRF business, mainly, as you may know, in Ontario, but we're starting to migrate a little bit west from Ontario. We make a couple of products from the things that we recover. We make consumer products and industrial products. We're like Tony McCutcheon, my friend of many years, Tony McCutcheon. We're in the business of making plastic materials from the stuff that comes out of blue boxes. Out of Tide bottles and fleecy bottles, we turn them into very high-end, thin-wall, dimensionally critical, appearance critical building products. We also turn them into bottles again. We like to think of ourselves as having the ability to upcycle or same-cycle things. And we do that given a lot of investment in chemistry and a lot of investment in technology. Our consumer products line include some garden mulch sold nationally throughout Canada through the big box stores, and wooden fuel pellets. So we like to think of ourselves as somebody who's capable of doing from garbage to goods. And I'm just going to, given that I'm holding you up from the break, I'm going to go a little quickly here. We have 700 employees in our group, and we operate 19 facilities. 14 of those are MRFs, both single stream and dual stream MRFs throughout the province of Ontario. We have 4 what I call recycling facilities. The MRFs I call recovery facilities, and then the consumer and industrial products, true recycling. We process about 650 tons, 1,000 tons of materials annually, and yes, we process some very challenged single and dual stream materials, and that's an important subject that we'll talk more about. We have about 1,000 customers, you know, that we're pleased to be able to service, and we have 28 years in the group. That shows you our facilities throughout the province of Ontario on the recovery side and also on the recycling side. On the recovery side of the business, I don't know, some of you have been in this facility. We have one in Toronto. It processes 250,000 kilograms per year, 250,000 tons per year of single stream materials. It has 14 optical sorters in it. It is recognized as the largest single stream facility in Canada and the most technologically advanced by virtue of the number of optical sorters it has. It is probably one of the most technologically advanced in North America, and that'll come into significance in the next part of the discussion. So, you know, hi, my name is Mark. I'm a garbageaholic too, as part of this group therapy session. We were all addicted to China. We all got addicted to the China drug. And for years and years and years, the industry shipped materials to China that had double-digit, some cases single-digit contaminants in it. That's not the case today, as other speakers have said. I want to emphasize something that was alluded to 2 or 3 times in the presentation. This is not all about China, guys. This is not all about China. We ship to many nations around the world, and we can tell you that what we are experiencing is the same demands for purity, that 0.5% that Al talked about for paper. We're experiencing that in many places in the world. I think it was you that, Lorenzo, that acknowledged that, you know, if China is stepping up and saying, don't give us anything that's got more than 0.5, why the heck would Timbuktu step up and say, I'll take your stuff that has 10% in it? So it's really a global phenomena. And I want to underscore that, because I think that realization is one that leads us all to, we are not in Kansas anymore. We're not going through one of those cycles that Al talked about, you know, where we're going to be back in Kansas 4 months from now. Purity's permanent. We're seeing worldwide restricted markets, as we say. The news of landfill, the landfill bans being lifted and stuff going to landfill and incineration and stockpiling. The news is only beginning. It's only beginning to reach prime time. There is a tsunami of news that is coming with respect to undigestible, contaminated materials. And we got to talk about it. It's good for the industry. Truly, you know, we're in that perfect storm. On the one side, people are saying they're not going to buy stuff that's contaminated, and on the other side, incoming contamination continues to rise. I was asked on CBC last Wednesday morning, you know, what typical contamination rates are in North America today. And I said, you know, the worst are 35%. You know, 1 in 3 pounds coming in shouldn't be there. We've seen it all. Believe me, we've seen it all. And, you know, when that happens and 10% of it is organics, you begin to wonder if even God himself could create a marketable grade of material out of that. A little bit tough to do. Better places in North America that I've seen, and yeah, dual stream can be a little bit better, but it's challenging too, down around the 10% level. So you got a lot of work to do to get to that 0.5. So it's a collision between, as Tony acknowledges, the demands of customers and what's coming in the door of MRFs in North America today. What I can tell you, and you know, I touch wood and I thank God, and you know, we count our blessings, anything that we're responsible for municipalities is reaching markets and has been reaching markets. And that happens through a lot of incremental work. Shoe leather in nations around the world, shoe leather in North America to create local circular markets. And extra effort does cost money. I mean, let's Barbara Walters, I think it was Barbara Walters, she used to say, can we talk? Was that Barbara Walters? I'm looking at some of the older people in the group. Al, Barbara Walters, can we talk? It costs money to be able to clean things up to the point where they're marketable, and it costs money to market things in a very, very challenging market. In that big MRF that we talked about, the one that does 250,000 tons per year, 250,000 tons a year, in that big MRF, about this time last year, actually it was February, we said to ourselves, oh my goodness, this Chinese phenomena, this tsunami that we're talking about, it's real. And we went out, we owned the MRF, we spent $7 million on additional equipment for that MRF. When we built that MRF back in 2013, it was a $40 million bill. We put in about $6, $7, $8 million since then, and then we put in another 6 or 7 last year in order to purify the paper to the point where it could meet that 0.5% contamination standard. We got out ahead of it. We're lucky. We got out ahead of it. Now, I will say that, you know, we have 13 other MRFs, and we weren't quite as fleet of foot in those other MRFs. In one of them, another facility that we have in Toronto that does about 125,000 tons per year, we have a very advanced optical and screening system for paper, and we have municipalities throughout the province of Ontario saying, hey, can you process our paper because we can't get her done using our technology that's 10 years old. So we're doing our best to keep up with those opportunities. Local market development. So local market development, we like to think of ourselves, as I said at the beginning, as a provider of those circular solutions, creating a local circular economy. And we've been able, through our urban polymers, our plastic recycling facility, to create very substantial diversion for the plastic materials that we generate in our MRFs. We've also worked with a number of entrepreneurial companies, and Grant and Carl, I just loved your stories about what you're doing. Quite frankly, we seek those end users out because those end users are the big markets of tomorrow, and we have to help them get started. So Christina wanted me to talk about market restrictions, but anybody who knows about my corporate career, my entrepreneurial career, I'm not really good at restrictions. I don't do restrictions well. I was a little guy when I played football. I was a little guy when I played hockey. And if I didn't learn how to get around big objects, okay, I would be a lot less or a lot more arthritic than I am today. So instead of talking to you about restrictions, I'm going to talk to you about what is our three-part plan that was hatched about a year ago to deal with this tsunami of change that we're going through. Number one, the municipal customers we have, they're not in it on their own, okay? Our contracts don't say that we have to help them with promotion and educational programs, but we're doing it. And we're going to do it even more intensely over the next little while because we have to crack the contamination blockade. Second thing we're doing, we talked about technology. We're deploying technology in a number of our plants, technology that we proved in the Big Hummer, the one that does 250,000 tons a year. And number three, we're developing end markets, local end markets. In terms of the communication piece, we're really passionate about this. If we have to deal with, in our MRFs, with material that's coming in that has car parts in it, has doggy doo-doo in it, it has organic food scraps in it, it has in some places 2x4s, and I could go on, but we've seen it all. We have to play a role with our customers in helping folks understand what can go in and what can't go in. That is our responsibility to the communities we're fortunate enough to serve. How are we doing that? In a number of ways. We have videos. Somebody spoke today about how school children, primary school children, grade 3 and 4, in fact, are really good at straightening out their parents' bad behavior. We have videos for schools that we do in conjunction with our municipal partners to help educate those really key influencers for good behavior. We're talking to media. In some cases, we're doing ads. We're just not going to be silent anymore. We have to break the silence with respect to contamination. In terms of technology, we've added a lot of technology, but when you add technology, you also have to be very good at communicating with your employees on the role that they play along with that technology. You can't have employees feel like they're going to get displaced as a result of the hunk of technology or equipment that you put in. You have to get them to embrace that new technology. I do quarterly town hall meetings with each of our facilities, and we began the introduction of this generation 3, we call, of MRF technology. We began the introduction to employees two quarterly town halls ago. This next one coming up starting April the 16th, we're measuring the results of their efforts and the technology's efforts to get us to those purity goals that we would like to get to. So yes, we have KPIs surrounding purity in our MRFs. We will continue with that communication with our employees. We will continue to push the envelope with technology. And the third thing that we're doing is our best, as I talked about, to develop local end markets. And you know, somebody recognized, I think it was Al, that, and it was in response to a question, you know, can domestic markets eat up or digest everything that, you know, was going to China and all these other places in the world? No way. No way. Over time, yes. But no way at this point. What we have to do is we have to play a role in developing those local end markets. We've taken a couple of steps with our Urban Polymers group that provides those pure, highly consistent, highly formulated, upgraded compounds, and with our consumer products, but we're not done yet. We're not done yet. Further forward integration on the horizon as we try and do our part to develop the local end markets. So Christina, I've not done a very good job of talking about restrictions, and I make no apology for that because I'm all about finding opportunities amidst chaos. We are truly in this tsunami of change. It's all about purity at this point in time. I believe we're only at the beginning with respect to headlines, Christina, that will truly help others as Dave had a bit of an epiphany listening to the speakers today. Hopefully other MLAs in various places around North America will have an epiphany as they understand the amount of material that's in storage, the amount of material that's being sent to landfills, the amount of material that's going to be incinerated. That doesn't have to be. That doesn't have to be. I'll say that we've been fortunate. I'll emphasize that in terms of being able to move materials to market on behalf of our customers. We touch wood when we say that because, you know, there are risks. Tom was beautiful. Tom was beautiful up front. Tom said, you know, you take a lot of risk when you send a container over to China because if you get the darn thing back, it's $5,000. Okay? It goes beyond that. It's reputational. Tom said, you know, we just don't take a risk with single stream. I think I heard that right. Did I hear that right, Tom? Okay. We are single stream. We're shipping it all over the world. The inspectors are in our plant from various nations before it goes. So those quarterly town hall meetings where we talk about the importance of purity and what we're doing to achieve purity and what employees' roles are in achieving purity, and when we celebrate their successes together, yes, there's a massive incremental effort. Our three-pronged plan is to help our municipal customers communicate. Let's be honest. It takes a while to change behaviors, okay, particularly when you're in a multilingual community. It takes a long time to change behaviors when there are containers that seal the dirty little secrets, okay? Lorenzo, you talked about that well. We'll get through this. We'll get through this together. We're going to continue to add technologies to the facilities that we own and in some cases help our municipal customers with technology. And we're going to do our best to develop the local circular economy. And just in closing, Christina, I want to thank you for allowing us to be a part of this wonderful, wonderful group therapy session. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mark. Thank you. So that is great information. I think that's very inspiring for all of us. We are now going to take a quick break. We're going to come back at 2:45. Mark is going to be back with us in the processing panel So the next section is actually on the panels where you get to really drill into some of the detailed questions. So if you want to just, there's food over the side, there's drinks, there's coffee. I also want to put a quick plug in for the SWANA conference, Solid Waste Association of North America. SWANA Northern Lights is here in Alberta, May 9th to 11th in Edmonton, and they are going to have a panel on markets, among many other interesting sessions. So check that one out, and we'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Okay, we're going to get started again here just in like a couple of minutes. So if everybody can find their seats again, grab a coffee and don't leave any food. We don't want any food waste. And if I can get our first panel down to the front, please. That's Lorenzo, Al, Carl, and Tony. Well, you're not listening. Where's Lorenzo? Where's Carl? You just need to sit at the front. Oh, okay, that's fine. Yep. So far. No, there's... Yeah, you're the only one. So far. Do we know where Carl is? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, of course, Lorenzo's famous now. Where's Tony? Okay. Yeah, do you want to go check and see who's out there? Sure, as long as you make it, yeah, really quick. Yep. So in the meantime, you guys can be thinking about all your questions. Does anybody know where Mr. Mukachin went? Yeah. Yeah, we might have to, maybe we could always switch. I mean, it was in the order for a certain reason. Well, Tony's on the next one as well, but Al's going to be back right away. You know what? That would work. Let's bring, is Tom here? Or is Tom out with the media? Okay. Lindsay, can you go grab Tom? We're just switching the agenda around. You're in both of them, so just come sit down. Rob, you come too. So what we're going to do is we're going to do collection and then processing, but you know, there's no particular, it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah, so we're going to start with processing, actually, and the things we can do under processing that can change things. Mark, can you come down for this one as well? And this will be perfect because you just presented. There might be some questions from your presentation as well. Yes, if you can just grab a chair. So the only one we're missing then is Tony. I don't know where he went. I guess if he comes back, that's fine. We'll just add him in when he gets here. So you guys heard lots about how improving the processing is going to be part of the solution, that we need to be able to have better processing systems to create the quality materials that we need to be able to market them. So I wonder if you guys can just do like, you know, a minute each of where you see that going in terms of processing. Like, how are our processing systems, and specific, can be specific to Alberta even better, but even overall, how is this going to change so that we can make better quality materials?
Yeah, I'll start. I don't know that I've seen or I know of any processor that can sort 1/2 of 1% out right now from single stream. I do not believe that the technology exists as we know it to do that. There's a trade-off here, I think, and let me take that back. You can do it, but you're going to be sorting one piece at a time. And, you know, we're talking how many tons per hour on a General MRF. So that one's going to be tough. I think it's going to be very, very tough. I think the success of this is going to have to go back to the generation. And, you know, one point came up I was thinking about. You know, I was aware of a contract out there that specifically required a MRF to have 0 residual. Now, if you think about that, that's ridiculous. 0 residual. So you're requiring, you're counting on the people that put into the bin that they know exactly what's going on. So in order to meet the contract, guess where the residual ended up? You know, in the bales. So I think the MRF processors generally are investing, from my point, a tremendous amount of money into this, and they're investing in technology. And granted, the technology has improved. I mean, it's third level. It's good stuff. But the reality is, I don't know it's going to ever get pure. You know, something drastically has to change on the front side in order to affect change on the back side.
You're trying to outdo us, aren't you? I think and again, spending the last 4 months trying to answer this question, what do we need to do when it comes to processing? Well, the first thing we need to do is separate the China system, the China impact with the domestic local challenges we've been having all along. And I think we're getting all confused because you're not going to China with your material. You're not making a China grade. You can't go there. So then really what you got to look at then is, you know, you're not putting technology in to get 0.5% contamination. PSI, you know, Institute specs are not, you know, we don't have to go there. But what we do have to do is go from receiving bad material and get better material, and we have to go from being terrible at what we do to try to get to being bad at what we do. And if we can get past that, we can probably get closer to being okay. And that's the reality. We're not facing reality is that most MRFs in North America just do a terrible job because they didn't put the technology to start in the first place. It isn't about that. So we really got to separate the two. So you're not putting technology into facilities to try to get 0.5% contamination. By the way, try it, because you're not going to get another penny for your material if you get 1% better, because you're going to India anyway. You know what India's biggest challenge is? Moisture. Why? Because when they break the bale open, they might want to sort it, and if it's too wet, it's going to stick together and they can't sort it. The other challenge with moisture is it's a 63-day trip to India in a container, 21 days to China. Wow, imagine 63 days of damp material in a container, what could come out of it at the end of it too. So, like those are the realities. Let's start talking about what's real here and what's going on.
So, 3 thoughts. At least 2 of them are going to be unpopular.
You said you didn't like this. You're a positive guy. What happened?
So, the first thing is that while all this is going on, a ton is evolving. And the kind of material that a system that was put in 10 years ago, designed to process, isn't the material going through today. And certainly isn't going to be the material going through a year from now. So processing really has to be, in our minds, nimble. And nimble means intelligent, and intelligent means optical sorters that are flexible in what they can positively sort. That leads to number 2. You got to make decisions really quick today. You know, with the change that's going on in the markets we serve and the change that's going on with the evolving ton, you you just got to move quick. And, you know, I submit that some places that have very rigid decision-making processes in place that take time to get through, it's going to be painful because the technology and the changes that have to happen to some of these 10, 12-year-old plus MRFs is huge. And, you know, if you're in a place where the technology is 10 or 12 years old and decisions have to get made quickly, maybe you got to ask yourself if it's the sort of thing that your place should be involved in. I'm choosing my words carefully here in case anybody notice. You know, some municipalities that are wedded to being in the MRF business might just want to scratch their heads. And we you know, the truth is we have some municipalities coming to us and they'll go through their processes and so on and so forth, but they're saying, you know what, this isn't our gig. This isn't our gig. You know, we don't have the scale. We don't have the scale to put in the intelligent technology. We can't make decisions as fast as they need to get made. So, you know, it's time to consider, you know, consider not being in there. The third thought is, you know, I believe we're in the era of convergence and convergence of services. Convergence between the haulage, the transfer stations in some cases, the processing, the marketing, even making products. And I mean, it's my, you know, it's my experience in my corporate life that when you have to make huge change, it's systemic. It's systemic. It's not piecemeal. You know, what could we be doing on the haulage end of things so that things are cleaner when they get to the MRF? There are probably a lot of things. So, number one, don't forget about the evolving ton. Number two, think about, you know, really whether or not it's your gig. And number three, convergence. It's all got to come together.
You want to go up to the podium and do your presentation? Okay. So Rob Rennie is actually the manager of the MRF in Edmonton, the one at the place that we were going to have this workshop before it got too big. So he certainly comes with a lot of experience in terms of how to make these systems work. There you are.
Can I see it this way?
Yes, you can. Sorry, I should have turned that. You betcha.
And what is it? Right for going forward?
Yeah.
Okay, I just got a promotion. I'm the marketing manager. So primarily I'm responsible for marketing material that comes out of the MRF, a bunch of other responsibilities beyond that. Years ago, I started at Laidlaw when they were red, white, and blue as a loader, lost 40 pounds in 5 weeks. It was awesome. And then after about 13 years, I moved over to the Region of Peel, where I was primarily responsible for marketing and MRF contracts at the Region of Peel MRF, which Canada Fibers operates now. So I've been at Suez about 3 years, and just a very little bit about Suez. First of all, I wanted to say something, and I wrote this down. I wrote a lot of stuff down that I don't want to forget. If municipalities got together and aligned their programs, that'd go a long way. In other words, recycle the right things well. Go deeper into the blue box versus wider. I see programs with straws, little wrappers. That's tough because looking at Suez, that's our Australian or European operations and our UK operations. They're all recycling facilities. Lots of municipal MRFs. Some are very modern. Some are waiting to modernize, and some are kind of old and tired. So in North America, we have one MRF we operate. That's the City of Edmonton MRF. And that's one that's working through a transition. It's, at this time, decked out with 3 screens, a bag breaker, and 2 magnets. So it gets pretty tough when you have an all-encompassing type of program. Which means, to make any kind of changes, I put all these up here. For MRF, that's primarily a municipal MRF, you got to do inbound audits. You got to quantify the composition, the makeup of the feedstock. You have to identify changes as they happen. It also helps the municipal staff in program decisions. They can target their P&E based on the findings. And you can also monitor the collection crew diligence. Residue audits will determine the amount of recyclable material that's being lost through the process. You can identify different recovery options. You can identify, training issues. You'll also, through time, understand the makeup of that material. You may have alternative processing options or perhaps even RDF. Commodity audits, that's key now. Always has been, but now it's very focused. We do at least 1 a day, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. You got to know if your process is meeting the end market specifications. You need to be able to talk to your buyers so that they know what you're trying to sell them. If you're downgraded or you have complaints, you have to have some data to back up your thoughts, of course. You can look at the cross-contamination in Alberta with the deposit return initiative. We found we were losing about 1/3 of that material in our newsprint as contamination. Well, 10 cents a can, that's valuable contamination, so it pays for itself to put some extra hands on it. So 1/3, that's about $40,000 a month right there, if we can pull it out. Of course, you identify mechanical sorting deficiencies, and you figure out if your allocation staff is right, and you can work with your training coordinators to make sure everybody knows what they're doing and why. So I called this opportunities. At first, I actually changed. At first, I called it selective failures. Mixed plastic, when I first started in 2015, we were actually, we had this thing, I didn't understand the term, they called it butter, but it was basically clamshells, some tubs, it was mixed plastics. Through our audits, though, we recognized we were paying about $100 a ton to have that recycled. And found by just changing, I mean, we had the same number of chutes, same number of sorters, so we started going for balls and jars and tubs and lids. Each gave us revenue. The trick on the balls and jars was most of my contacts were in the East, Ontario specifically. So when I sent pictures, it just looked odd. It really did. So I made sure we said no ketchup balls as an example because of the nylon barrier. We started that way. We've got a pretty solid market now. We're starting to add thermoform in. Because we don't have any optical sorters, we just train our people, okay, start putting some of this stuff in. Early reports are the yields are good. It's bottle grade stuff. So we're trying to stay away from the heavy labeled stuff. We're trying to stay away from the dark colors, that sort of thing. So we're going for clear, basically. So far, so good. Oh, the one thing I will mention, too, is because our residue audits showed that we were missing a lot of material, we just chose to get the good stuff and miss the hard market stuff. So it's equal tons in our case. Film recovery, okay, it's an opportunity. We pull that everywhere. It's a real problem. We have some VACs, we have some chutes. Our recovery rate based on what we get is only about 20% because everybody is instructed wherever you can get your hands on it, it comes off the line before it turns your screens into conveyor belts. Brownstone OCC. That was interesting. I mean, it was worth a lot more money, so it just made sense. You pull it out of the newsprint, especially small stuff, including the box board. Problem there now is we're getting calls saying it's starting to look too bright. We only have so many bunkers. It's got to go somewhere. It's just a new challenge, I think. Mixed paper. Call it number 6, call it mixed paper. We call it number 3 because we took the term mixed paper out because no one wants to hear that. So it's almost like boutique inventory management. At first, we actually had, so our fiber that came off the finishing screen, we just had that run directly to join the other stuff. So it was almost like cleaning, reducing your percent of contamination through dilution, if you will. But over time, we found some higher paying markets. So we started doing things a little bit differently, and we started baling that as mixed paper, but we still called it number 8, and we'd salt and pepper that into loads. Well, the loads we salt and peppered them into were the Chinese loads, because we actually found some South Korean markets that were paying $40 more a ton. So it just made sense to say, okay, these are for you, these we're going to mix into the Chinese loads. You know, these numbers aren't perfect, they're just thrown up there. There's no trade secrets for anybody here. First 3 months of the year compared to 2017, we're down $750,000. The interesting thing there, I mean, everybody knows about price, that's the bulk of it, but we're also down 1,500 tons of OMP shipped to market. You can see that the OCC's up because we're aggressively going after it. That accounts for a little bit of it. But using that analysis, oh, yeah, I mean, this is, like you showed that. This goes back to 2013. The blue line's us. The red line's the previous contractor, selling price for OCC. And then it's a mix of different yellow sheet prices, Pacific Northwest, Midwest. I threw Buffalo in there for something to do because we have a couple of contracts tied to it. Yeah, like it's fallen off the rails, but we just got used to those peaks. I mean, we can't forget that. We're back to levels that we used to do year after year after year, to some degree, you know. Is it going to fall? Yeah, maybe more. But we all did our budgets at that peak, of course. There's the OMP. And because we only have OMP, we have no mixed paper, I also compared it to the mixed paper pricing, which, yes, is now in Pacific Northwest minus 20. That kind of accentuates where we've gone. So through March 2017, 57% newsprint shipped to market, 36% OCC. Now we're actually shipping more OCC than ONP. And this explains some of that. 2017, you'll see our newsprint was 41%. This is recovered, actually. OCC, 27%. Our residuals are high, but there's an unfortunately, it's a lot of residuals coming into the MRF to start with. Metals were only 1%. Plastics were only 2%. 2018, you can see our OCC is actually up a little bit. Newsprint is down substantially. Plastics are up, metals are up, and residues up, and that's because we're getting it out of the newsprint, trying to clean it up. That 5% says OMP, no markets. That's the challenge right there. That's off our finishing screen line. So our production manager came up with this idea. When I first started, we had less than 30 sorters, and we were running at 22 tons an hour. And the reputation for our paper, when we tried to sell it, we got comments back. You mean the blue stuff? That's because it's a bag program. The blue plastic was all through the paper. So well, it says China ban, but as we tried to look, it's almost a recipe. So we were working 40 to 50 hours a week, 10-hour shifts. You know, we'd cancel shifts when needed. We'd work overtime when needed. We had kind of a fixed setting with 53 sorters. It's a lot of hands. Now we've gone to 2 8-hour shifts, and it's a bit of a recipe where we've slowed right down to 10 to 13 tons an hour, over more hours. We got defined quality targets, and we're managing the tip floors. So if there's a lot on the tip floor, we turn up the speed a bit, we put more hands on it. And of course, the inverse is true. When the floor is almost empty, as can happen this time of year, we we'll slow it right down and take some hands off, with the focus being on these daily audits that we're doing. This is kind of interesting. I always believe that you have to diversify. It's not about $2 a ton. It's about opening doors, creating relationships, and basically just finding homes for your stuff. So 2016, that was our fiber distribution. It was about 95% of what we market, 65% was newsprint, 35% OCC. You can see the split. At that time, 54% was going to China, 22% South Korea, 24% North America. OCC was 95% China. 2017, we're down to 94% through the first half, 61% newsprint. We're starting to move into some North American markets there. South Korea moving up, China moving down. Then we had this, July announcement, and it became real. For us, anyways. So for the second half, you can see how we're starting to move stuff away from China out of necessity and foresight. Now, year to date, we did move about 4% to China. That's stopped now. My risk here, and it's clear, is all our eggs are back into one basket. So, so much for diversification. So that's a challenge, trying to work that again. And that's it.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, that definitely puts some details to things. Tony, now that you're back, I wonder if you can just very briefly, in just 1 or 2 minutes, tell us your perspective of how things have to change processing-wise because of this situation. By processing, I'm talking about primarily the MRFs.
I mean, that's kind of lost, but nothing has changed for us. I mean, we basically start building domestic market way before the Chinese market disappeared, and our process has not changed. We're getting more and more people calling us saying, would you like to buy our material? And there's more tonnage available for us, but our business model has been to look at long term. We're not here to make a quick dollar on a brokerage deal. We're here to build sustainable solutions that works day after day. And we stick to our supplier who have been there with us for many years, and we do take tons when they are available for long term. It does take a lot of money to build the infrastructure. It's not cheap, as Mark mentioned. It's multiple optical sorters, and there's more than that to it. And it's multi-million dollars, tens of millions of dollars to build one. So it's, we can't build one just because somebody has a load there and he lost his market. So municipality or supplier to us, or whoever, the suppliers can be municipality, can be private enterprise, have to look at two concepts. I mean, do they want a spot buyers or do they want long-term buyer? We are not a spot buyer, and we basically plan for the long haul. And sometimes it looks like we've made the right decision, and sometimes it doesn't look right. But again, nobody makes the right decision every time. But this is the concept. We stick to it from the time we started. So.
Just to put it into perspective, because I know it certainly did for me, can you just tell us your amazing container plant in Vancouver? How many people, this does all the containers in BC for the EPR program. How many people work in that plant? How many sorters?
I mean, we're continuously improving it. We have probably, you should have asked me this question before coming. No, it's not. I mean, it's we have a lot of optical. I mean, we do have mechanic, we have technician, we have electrical, electricians. So it doesn't require as much sorter as it does require. But I mean, for the equipment to work, for an optical to work, the material has to be fed properly. So it's not just about the optical. I mean, the material has to be fed properly. It has to have you have to have the also the infrastructure behind it. The compressed air has to be dry. You have to have dryers, and everything has to be correct for it to function. So it does require a lot of effort. And many people painted that it's just plug and play. It's no plug and play. So it does require a lot of effort, and one of the reasons we've been successful is because our partner like Cascade and Emterra have recognized that it is better to invest in one facility to do the job versus having two optical working 50% of the time and less efficient in 10 different facilities versus having one single place that concentrates. So I mean, I have to take my hat off for our partner who actually kind of encouraged that to go this direction. It was not Merlin's idea. It was Al's idea.
Do you want to comment, Al, on that plant? Because if any of you get a chance to go see this facility, it blew my mind. I've been through a lot of MRFs in my life. This one blew my mind. It's the most amazing place.
Because Tony's an amazing guy. No. Hey, all kidding aside, I really, a container plant, it's a great container plant. I want to take this a little bit higher, okay? And, we talk about technology. It's not about technology. I got 2 points to make here. When we looked at British Columbia, when we started to design British Columbia and the program for British Columbia, for GBN and Tony and as our partner, what I recognized and what we recognize as a group is that when you look at all of the facilities in the province, even anywhere you go, call it Alberta, is it really about one big mega facility? Should every facility be able to do everything all of the time? Because that's been our greatest challenge. Because when you design a facility, you add one more material to it, you're screwed. Because you can't process it. Therefore, you are restricted to that facility. So as part of our plan, what we recognized was that if we could separate fibers and containers, whether it's because the other thing was there's single stream programs, there's 2-stream programs, there's depots. You got to cater to all of this. You're not going to change the world. That's a fact. So if you separate fibers and containers, and you can do that at a preconditioning facility, let's call it, then you can have a lot of preconditioning facilities that do 100 tons, 1,000 tons, 10,000 tons, because you're separating fibers and containers. Then all we do is take the containers and you bring them to one facility so that that facility has the technology and the ability to do whatever it is. And not only that, which was really cool, was that we can actually take those materials afterwards, and yes, we sell it back to Mr. Tony here, and he turns it back into resin. And that was really the concept here, is to kind of bring it local. Because I think the other thing we got to look at, and people talk about technology, really? What technology are you going to put into play? What? Who's controlling the blue box? Think about that. What's the next material in the blue box? Hey, as a brand owner, as a packaging producer, I need my thermoform containers collected. I need my foam trays collected. We need, I guess the plastic film guys need their stuff collected. The multi-laminate people need their collected if we're going to have some responsibility. So this isn't about the supply chain or the MRF. It's about understanding what is the purpose of the blue box in the future. Because at the end of the day, everyone, doesn't matter whose facility it is. We can make materials. We can sort those materials. If we get paid for them, we can make the bale. And if that's where our responsibility lies, which is where it should, we've done our job. Then whoever owns that bale or whoever needs, whatever market it needs to go, somebody else has got to take care of that. It's not the MRF. It's not the processors. It's not the supply chain's responsibility to worry about the circular economy, because it's much bigger than all of us at the end of the day. So we're having, and what got us, and me personally, being in this industry so long, is that where do I spend my money? In a MRF. The technology's there. There's optical sorters. There's robotics now. There's all kinds of things. What are they going to sort? What are they going to sort? And are we going to start talking about, well, let's only accept 1s and 2s? Well, whose decision is that? What about multi-laminate containers that need to be picked up? The number 4s, the 5s, all of the plastics. So it's bigger now. We got to look at what is it that we want to do, and then the supply chain. I'm quite confident the supply chain can sort those materials down to color if that's what you want. If you've got the money, it can get done. So we've got a whole bunch of balancing to do and rethinking, I believe, of what this processing is all about. It's not what we know. It's all about what we don't know.
So I agree with Al, and I have to say one other further thing is that Blue Box is a very good vehicle. This is what started recycling. But we have to recognize that Blue Box also has limitation. It's good for certain things, but it may not be good for everything. So recognizing what actually is optimum recovery system. I mean, Blue Box does have a role to play. Every one of us have a role to play, just recognizing the exact roles, that the optimum roles we all have to play and play it. That's a key thing.
And we'll talk about that more in the collection session, which is next. Questions. There must be questions on processing. Remember, this is the processing panel. So other questions you might have on how these materials are sorted, where you see them ultimately going. Oh, there we go.
Jason Doucette, Parkland County. To basically all the applicable presenters, don't want to come across as negative, but I got to ask, if the necessary changes don't occur to collection and to processing, how stable are current recycling programs in the province, in Canada, and if they're not, what's your perceived lifespan of those recycling programs?
Do you want to start with that one, Mark?
Whoa, that's not an easy one. So in a nutshell, what's being asked is, if there isn't change, where's the implosion going to happen, and how long is it going to take to get to the implosion? So you have to look to first what Al and Tony and Emmy have done in British Columbia in a fairly short period of time to create a systemic change, a change that really, Al, from the outside looking in, took a white sheet of paper and said, how can we make it better? We may quibble about results and things like that, but there's no question that there has been a positive impact because of the systemic approach that's been taken. That's the positive. The other side of this story is, look, you're starting to see it all over North America. The announcement that came out in Seattle yesterday, the announcements all down the West Coast in Quebec, the announcement that's been made, things are, the wheels are coming off the bus in places that are wedded to doing things the way that they've always been done. The wheels are coming off the bus in places where decisions just can't get made quickly, and I respect that. In some places, they just can't. But do you throw out the blue box? No, I don't think so. In Ontario, and I'm sorry for the Ontario example, it's just top of mind. I'll get better at this over time, Christina. 900,000 tons, $70 to $90 million worth of revenue created in a year from the Blue Box program. That's a lot of good to just turn your back on. So yeah, there are going to be some collisions, but I think if there are systemic decisions that are made, and I use yours as one example of a systemic approach, if decisions are made quickly and they're made with kind of a convergence lens on things, the train wrecks will be less.
Tom, you bring a more of a global perspective, I think, than most of us. Can you address, are we headed for a train wreck?
Well, define train wreck. You know, I got to think we're all in the recycling business. As I see this, you know, we've got a circular, you know, recycling is a circular thing. You know, personally, from my experience, our industry is coming full circle. I personally feel we've pushed the envelope at what cost. You know, we can collect and process anything we want, but ultimately, who's going to pay for that? Certainly, private business can't pay for it. And I believe that the infrastructure is just too complicated to allow the commodity values to support that 100%. So how much are we going to pay? And again, I'm from the U.S., so there's, you know, it's a little different, although the flavor's the same. Who's going to pay for that? Ultimately, I have to pay for it at the curb, you know, and how far does that go? I think there's going to be some serious changes. I think you know, and collection is going to be part of this. How do we look at that? How do we do that? Is single stream collection? I think ultimately single stream collection was developed because there was a significant cost reduction in collection. And the sorting and the MRF infrastructure, combining those two were still a lower cost than dual stream collection. I guess I might argue the fact has the increase that we saw up here, you know, 50%, the cost increase, has that overshadowed the savings on the initial phase. So again, no, I don't think it's, you know, the wheels aren't going to come off. The wheels are going to change.
Okay.
You know.
No, valid. Yeah, I think Tony wants to take you out for beer and talk to you about how the EPR programs work here and who actually really pays. Other questions? Mikhail. Oh, sorry. Grant has one. Well, Grant and then Mikhail.
This is for Rob. If you compare February of this year to February of last year, how much more are you allowing off the end of that conveyor that's going to go to the landfill than you did last year?
Let's ask the manager. 5%?
That's all?
Yeah, I guess he's right. Yeah, quite a bit. And some of it's recoverable. It's just you have to make some hard decisions, as I say, to create a marketable product.
But you're not just bailing it and sending it to the landfill and saying, okay, maybe more next year, maybe more next year.
No, you can't.
As a solution.
You can't do that. We're up to a third of what we process right now is going out as residuals. Now, the city is working on some creative solutions. I'm not privy to all of them, but don't even want to mention Enerchem, do I? But
yeah, well, that's another question.
Is Enerchem, that's not mine.
Yeah, you shouldn't have brought that one up. Are they up and running now?
That's for another session.
Okay,
that's another session.
Okay.
I'm not. I will tell you, though, that a lot of what's going out as residual is non-recyclable. We're just aggressively getting it out of the other materials.
Great, thanks. Mikhail.
Hey, question for Mark. With regards to us being in the West, and then I think we see from our business being East and West as well, there's definitely a delay in the East on what's been going on in the marketplace based on China. So for our municipal accounts in the West that are heavily dependent on export, can you explain a little bit from your perspective in the East and Ontario, you know, are you making that 99.5% grade of municipal materials coming out of your facility with the increased technologies? What percentage, if you're allowed to share, are actually going export to China that are now being impacted by it? Like, just to contrast the difference between the East and the West.
Okay, so let me unwrap the questions as best I can. First one, you know, can you make stuff pure enough that you can sell it around the world? So far, so good.
Specifically China, not around the world.
In certain instances, and I have to qualify it, where technology has been added, things are working well. So that was the first part. What was the second part?
Of your business model, for example, City of Toronto, the 250,000 tons that you're processing a year, has there always been a high dependency on export for those materials, or is a lot of it being consumed domestically?
So export's been a big part, Mikhail, of the mix. But when we unpack things as Rob did and take a look at what's domestic today versus what was a year ago, more domestic today than a year ago. And if we do our work right, that will continue.
Other questions? Yes.
Arun Kumar.
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah, Arun Kumar, Laklabish County. I think, Tony, you'd mentioned that for plastics, on the demand pull side of it, oil is an influencer, the oil price. I'm just kind of wondering, is there a break-even point where you see more of a demand when at a certain point where prices reach?
There is probably a break-even point, but to be honest with you, I don't know what it is. There is probably, an economist that have done that work, but I haven't. Maybe Mark would know.
So it's not just about oil. It's about supply and demand, and Tony talked about this earlier. Today, the amount of excess capacity there is to produce virgin PET in the world is about 30%, okay? So you got to remember your economics course, the relationship between supply and demand. That has real downward pressure on virgin pricing. HDPE is the same thing. HDPE, there's a tremendous amount of capacity that's come on stream. So, if there were a war tomorrow and in an unfortunate place and oil prices went up, yeah, that would probably have an increased effect on plastic. But you've got to look at the change in the supply and demand curves for virgin before you're going to see anything substantial, and that is not coming in the next 2 minutes.
I will add one thing. There's something new that happened with the shale gas. I mean, it has changed the dynamics. 5, 6 years ago, when you were speaking to experts, they will say there will be no more virgin resin capacity in North America, and yet all the polyethylene capacity that's are coming in North America since the shale gas. And in Saudi Arabia and other places, they use oil as a base. But in North America, they use natural gas as a base. And the ratio of natural gas to oil is historically used to be 10-to-1. So if $2 a gigajoule versus $20 a barrel, this was the break-even point between both. You go natural gas or oil base. But right now, I mean, it's much more favorable to go, even with $3 a gigajoule, it's much more favorable to go gas than it is oil. And that's where a lot of virgin capacity are coming in the Gulf Coast.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay, I think what we'll do, because we're going to move on to the collections, but just very quickly, Rob, just to close us off, can you just tell us, because you actually work at a MRF and have seen a MRF that sort of is getting a bit older, in your perfect world, does a MRF like the City of Edmonton need a big investment in terms of upgrading processing so that you have a better chance of meeting quality standards?
Sure. Do you want to talk about the private sector again? Yeah, it does. Now, the thing is, I mean, the question always is, do you build a new one? Do you contract out merchant capacity? Or do you invest? And if you invest, do you do it sequentially or all in one shot? I asked one of the guys a question the other day. I said, if somebody said, what one piece of technology, if you could only have one, what would you put in? And that's even debatable. Okay. In an older MRF, where does it give you the bang for the buck? If we put it on the plastic line and it goes for PET, we end up with all the clamshell. And then you got to put labor on it to QC it. You put a ballistic separator in, and so on and so on. So, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, then what we're going to do actually is we're going to keep Tony and Al up. The others can sit down, and we're going to have Lorenzo and Carl join us. And we are going to talk a little bit more about collection. So very briefly at the beginning, just to kick things off, can we just have each of you just give a really quick, like 30-second, 1-minute summary of what you think, I know what you're going to say, what needs to change in terms of collection to help us deal with this issue?
As far as to make the material easier for us to use, we'd like to see paper, fiber, or cardboard, at least the fiber, kept separate from the metal and the plastic. That's our biggest issue that we have, is keeping the fibers can be separated, but
fibers separate from containers.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's a multifactorial question. The first thing I'd ask is, what are the standards? What are the material, the end product material, commodity types that you're trying to make? Tell me what the commodity types are, to what purpose, and what your plants are capable of, and then I'll tell you the best collections. It's just logistics. Compaction, not compaction, mode of collection, all those different variables. So that's really, and we were in this chaotic moment where we're not really sure where that's going to settle out. It doesn't sound like it's going to continue to be single stream, but...
But, sorry, can I just push you on that, Lorenzo?
Yeah.
So if I'm a municipality, we are getting recorded. So if I'm a municipality and I want to introduce curbside collection in the next 6 months, what would you tell me to do?
Well, I would argue you'd err on the side of caution. Container, paper separate is probably a good idea. Staying away from modes of collection that can hide material. So I wouldn't be in favor of blue carts. Or if I went to carts, I would go with transparent carts, which are on the market, but they're much more expensive. And then everything surrounding the rollout, I would understand from the start that accountability to the homeowner, the person putting the material out, has to be maintained at all levels, at all times, throughout the program.
I think the first thing we'll do is try to identify what materials are we going to collect and get that settled first. And then start looking, like the assumption is that the blue box is going to take care of everything. We were having a conversation earlier, and it may, so I don't know that answer, but we had a conversation earlier about deposits versus blue box. So, you know, in my mind, I keep thinking, okay, you got a deposit system, costs a lot of money to carry a deposit system out. You take that to a depot, got depots all set up, and then there's a truck that goes by my house and picks up some other materials in a blue box. You know, is one or the other? Do we need both? How do we make, you know, if we know what we're going to collect ultimately, then maybe then we can design accordingly. And then the collection system could be such that, yes, contamination is a problem, maybe a lot of education around that, because but it's a given that there will be some there, but I don't know if 22% or 23% is the right number. You know, is 8 or 9? Can we handle that? So, you know, we got to understand what we're dealing with, and then on the collection side, we can have some, you know, is a depot the answer? Is it all curbside? Is it 4 containers at the curb? Are we going to go backwards? I think we can answer that once we know exactly what we're going to collect. Because I think right now just saying, you know, single stream is not, I think single stream's okay when you look at it, so long as it's not contaminated with a lot of residue. And therefore, you know, it works. You can sort the material. You can sort the material.
Well, I mean, I look at it from a different perspective. I look at it from a market perspective. To me, the first thing first is market. What does the customer want? So if I have to put a system, if I'm responsible to put a collection system for whatever come out, you know, for packaging product, I will look at what residual is being generated through a cart program, what residual is being generated through a blue box program, what residual is generated by 2 stream versus single stream. I would look at this. I'd look also at end of market. So I mean, if one program has a 35% residue and they have a hard time moving their commodity product to end market, is this a system I would want? In business schools, the first thing you learn is you don't make a product and then you go and sell it to your customer. First of all, you listen to what your customer wants. And what the customer wants, you go in and build a product based on your customer demand. You don't just jam whatever you want into your customer mouse.
Okay. Fair comment. Okay, I know there must be questions because I know there's a lot of people in this room that have to deal with the whole collection side of things. Perry.
This one's for Al. You just mentioned that you'd drive by, you'd go to a depot, take your bottle, but then there was a truck that would be driving by anyways. So you stating in Alberta, there would be no ABCRC, there are no 1,800 or so bottle depots, nothing to that sort?
I didn't say that. So what I did say is you would look at everything and look at it closely to identify, because first of all I said, what are we collecting and what needs to be collected? And then look at, we all know now how bottle depots work, we know how single stream works, we know how two stream works, we know the technology. So this isn't 1974 where we're just talking about starting the blue box. We've gone through it all. So it's time, you know, what is it we're going to collect? And then let's decide on what the best place to collect it is for what we heard here, which is what's the outcome? What generates the less residue? What creates the better end market product from the method of collection? So there's a lot of variables. It could be all. It could be single stream, two stream, and depots.
Well, that's what I meant.
The and
then Tony answered, of course, because that's a good market for you, Tony. It's all
yeah,
sort of separated.
yeah. You know, as far as I'm concerned, if you can measure success in different way, people go in and measure success about whatever their truck was hauling, regardless of if this material is going to the garbage or if it's going to be recycled. Some people measure about success about what is the recovery rate. So if you look at the recovery rate of a depot system, by far, it's way ahead of anything I have seen. So, you know, what are the key performance measurement you're looking at? If you're looking at, you know, there's no key performance measurement on residual, or is there? Because if there is key performance on residual, and a depot system is by far ahead of anybody. If you're looking at key performance measurement on demand for the product, the demand for the product from product coming out of a buyback center or a depot are significantly higher than the demand coming from a you know, an unknown or collection system, or you know, throw wherever you want in a truck and drive it to a sorting plant.
You wanted to comment on this, Lorenzo, and then we'll go to Leah has a question.
Yeah, I just want to introduce you know, some concepts that go through, I think, probably everyone on the panel's mind about collection systems. So one concept is there's this sort of tension between the collector and the end MRF. Now, ultimately, for a MRF, the cheapest thing, most desirable thing might be that an infinite number of categories of material that was 100% pure showed up. So every individual wrapper was separate and pure from the next thing. Although then you could argue the barrier to entry would be so low, there'd be nothing to keep everyone from doing the business. But, okay, so the MRF might want things in more different streams. The collector wants everything all together, wants to jam-pack it as full as possible and haul it to the absolute legal limit within a kilogram. That's what the hauler wants to do because it's lowest cost. In the midst of that, you have a cost comparison. And the MRF's approach is the theoretically most costly, and the hauler's approach is the theoretically lowest cost. So there's a tension there. We also have a tension when we ask ourselves, you know, well, who are we selling to? What do they really want? This is part of the problem of recycling. Is the person we're selling to the ratepayer, the resident? Is it the municipality? Is it like a demand pull where it's actually the mill?
as Tom keeps alluding to. And they also have competing tensions and conflicting that sort of, intersect with those other tensions. And all of this, the rubber meets the road, so to speak, a lot of times in the collection system. And the past practice has been, well, China will take all this mixed bag of stuff, so we can give the ratepayer a lower price. We'll bypass all the mills and the demand pull and utilize China to do that, and we'll ship it there. But, that wasn't a very good long-term strategy, apparently. So this is part of the complexity is where, like Al alludes to, you gotta tell me more about, okay, where do we saw off those decisions? Where do we saw off what materials are going to be included? We need to know more of that. And then we can tell you very effective, cost-effective collection systems for those parameters.
I mean, I've studied business, and I tell you, in every business book I have read, in Business 101 to whatever, it's always the customer is the one who dictates the system, except in recycling.
Hi, so Leah Seabrook with Strathcona County, and first I just want to thank everybody for all of the perspectives that are shared here today. I think the municipalities in the room, though, maybe that's the missing perspective. So a couple of questions and comments, and I'll be a little bit all over the place, but Al, you mentioned that once we know what materials we can get to market and that sort of thing. We'd like to know when will we know that, because we're all waiting for changes to our blue bag programs and what to do. And there's a lot of us in the room that are working together to be consistent, try to roll it all out together, but we don't know what that is. So when will we know if you guys don't know yet?
So you want to answer that one?
First question.
Do you want to do that one first and then do another one? Okay.
It's a great question. When will we know? And I think that's the implosion that's going to occur. With all due respect to the entire system, so let's forget about China for a second. Let's go back over the last couple of years. Let's talk about EPR. Let's talk about all those great things that we've been talking about. How well have we done with that? Like, where are we with that? It's not progressed as you thought. And then let's not just look at Canada, because if we look at the U.S., I mean, they're way far. They're way behind. The best things that we're doing. So keep that in mind. So, when I'm afraid that we have a lot of people that are going to try to answer and try to find solutions due to this crisis that aren't qualified to understand some of the things we brought out today at a higher level to factor into the answer. And what we're going to end up seeing is a lot of blue box programs diminishing, starting to talk about, let's just collect 1 and 2, let's just put newsprint in there, let's just do, decisions are going to be made, and we're going to take this industry right down the drain, because there's going to be so much flux. We won't know what direction to go, because again, we're in the middle of it, sitting here going, well, we can do a lot of things. We can do a lot of things. We can do it. We just don't know what is it that we need to do. And I feel your pain. I feel your pain as a municipality right now. Like, what do you do with this? What's our you want to make the next move. What is the next move? And that's.
So are you saying stay the course for now?
There is no course, is what I'm saying. I'm not kidding. I mean, everyone's trying to make decisions all over the place. Like, what's the course? I've been in it for 39 years now, and I'm trying to figure out the course also. Not only, from a curbside, but from, industrial commercial sector. What do we do? And so the course right now is figure out how you're going to pay for what we are doing right now, and then work with everyone to say slow down, to make the right decisions as how we're going to get out of this. Because for the amount of money everyone's going to start losing, some great the decisions that are going to be made are going to solely be made on the fact of, we can't possibly keep losing all this money. We need to do something right now. And I wish we had that right now answer. We will. We got to work on it. It's going to take time. And it won't be now, and it won't be what we traditionally understood in the past. That's the other thing.
Leah, that's a very pertinent question. So one of the things you'd look at as a processor is, for example, do you want me to access lower grade markets that have much longer sustainability? Or if they're not lower grade, but let's say they're at a higher cost to me to produce. So suppose we're going to say, okay, You know, Cancel and Allied Papers have a tremendous reputation in the city. They've been in business a long time. It's going to cost me a lot more to add equipment to make that. Is the municipality willing for that long-term sustainability to pay 50 a ton more? This is where some of this decision-making comes in. Because I can give you effective, sustainable solutions, but there's going to be a cost. You know? The other brief point I want to make is, I hope one thing take home from today's talk is, look, the reality, I'm a very straight shooter. I try to be a very fair dealer. There are some local contractors in the province right now saying we can pick up more and we're not facing the same problems. I hope everyone has seen today that the first person you disqualify from this discussion is the person who says, things are fine. Well, I guess if you always took it to landfill, I guess things are fine because it's still going to landfill. You know, so, you know, there has to be some...
Just to build just 1 second off what Lorenzo's saying, I think one thing as a municipality, before you go making a decision about removing materials from your program, is you have to consider, do I make a rapid change now based on misinformation or a very quickly or slowly evolving situation? Or do I say, okay, chat with my processor, there's no market for this material right now. We will continue to accept it because your citizens are going to continue to put them in the blue cart or your blue box or your blue bag, regardless of whether or not you tell them that they can or cannot. And you accept that material as non-marketable residual. That's something that you just may have to do for now as you watch the situation evolve.
So, I mean, I just want to answer your question, going a little bit one step backward. But if the money was coming from my blue jeans, I would, the course I would take is before I put anything in a blue box, I will trust and verify. If a processor come to me and say, hey, you know, everything is fine, I'll show me the proven market for every commodity. So if you have a proven market, show me this proven market. You know, I think this is a very legitimate question, and if the money is coming from my pocket, that's what I would ask. And I would very much encourage every municipality to ask the same question. See, I would only collect products that have a proven market, and I will investigate that those proven market exist. Just you know, at the end of the day, it may be today, it may be tomorrow, but the truth will shine sooner or later.
No, it's a fair comment. The whole issue of accountability. Leah, next question.
I guess that kind of leads into my second question, which was also something you said earlier, Tony, about your customers are the markets, and municipalities, our customers, are our residents. And what they demanded, or at least in Strathcona County, we've done poll after poll, and the biggest thing, or their biggest objective out of a recycling program is actually convenience. It beats the environmental, is they want a convenient program. So I guess it also touches a bit on what Sharon said, is there a balance that we can achieve? So you're saying only put in things that have markets, but our fear as a municipality, or maybe it only exists in mine, is that if we become too restrictive, if we're only asking for things that overcomplicate it, we will lose half of the participation at the curb, therefore you guys will get much less product. So is there a bit of a balance?
You know, it's a very good question. I mean, this is a debate I have almost every day with my wife. She wants to put everything in the blue box. And, you know, it's at the end of the day, I believe that people, myself and everybody, likes education and like to make the right decision. And it's not just about feel good, but, you know, people are becoming more and more you know, busy, but also their you know, knowledge are at the tip of their you know, whatever question my son asked me, 9 years old, I mean, he Googled it and he has the answer before I have a chance to open my mouth. So, I mean, the highway of information is becoming very fast, but people are yearning to do the right thing. Nobody wants to put, you know, and I explained to my loving wife that this product, if you put it in, it's going to mess me up in my recycling. She doesn't put it in, and she still participates in recycling. Or my kids, or myself. I mean, I put stuff in it, but you know, people wants to do the right thing, and sooner or later, I mean, do you make them aware up front, or do you wait until, because they will know, sooner or later they will know. Someday somebody will come to you and say, hey, you've been collecting all this and you've been telling me that it's going all being hanky-dory, and you're taking 30% of it in the garbage. You misled me all those years. I mean, would you rather face that, or would you rather educate them up front and saying, this is why I collect this and this is why I collect that? I mean, I've lost business because sometimes my competitor claims that he can do things he cannot, and this is not Mark. But not specifically. But at the end of the day, you know, it will come back.
Tony, not to argue with you, because I know we never argue. How do we drive change? How do you drive change? This conversation is going backwards. And this whole process is about what? Recovering materials, getting them back, you know, get that whole sort. If you don't create the crisis and deal with it, then how do we drive change? How do we make the right product so that Tony's not sitting there going, I just want all these, I don't want all that other stuff. Who's focusing on the stuff that doesn't work? And because we always focus on what we know, and that's the conversation we're going to start having, and this is going to be the wrong place to go when we're trying to find this very important solution now that we're going to need as a result of what happened in China. You got to drive change now. You got to make things. It's about the things that don't work we should be focusing on, not on the things that work, because that's what we know, and I think that's the difference.
But I just want to make a point. I believe this is how you drive the change, by not putting it into blue box and flushing it out. By disguising it and making it that everything is rosy, you are not going to drive a change. You're going to drive the change by saying, this does not work.
No, you're right. This is a great conversation. But we're going to go to Chris now.
Hi there, guys. Chris Simons with MachineX. Just a question, probably more for Tony and Al, maybe Lorenzo too. But are you finding that EPR is helping to create markets for what was previously unmarketable material? Is it making a difference in finding homes for more materials?
I think EPR is a vehicle that could, you know, I mean, again, is Tylenol going to cure you? If you take 10, you know, I mean, it could and it could not. But I mean, if EPR, I think it's a good vehicle, provided that it is managed properly. I mean, again, it is definitely a good vehicle. I mean, they have contact to brand owner. They have, you know, the audience that could make the change versus you know, a single municipality may not have the contact to all those brand owners. So if there is a package that is problematic and you raise it up and you say, I cannot recycle it, I have failed. Plus there is accountability that in a municipal program, it's out of sight, out of mind. I don't see any municipality kind of saying what was their recovery rate, what was their yield, what's happening with the end product. I haven't seen a mass balance, but under an EPR system, it's a deposit or not deposit, because deposit is an EPR system too, some sort of an EPR system. There is accountability, and the bar is significantly higher. It's not out of sight, out of mind.
I think for EPR programs, it's a financial model, so it covers the cost, and so it possibly does help municipalities do that. And I think it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen in the next, say, 6 months, where EPR programs are 100% producer pay. As the cost of those programs start to go up, will that raise attention to the materials now that they own and are part of the program? And will they then step up to the plate and finish the loop and say, you know what, it's my material? And we're all trying to find the solution for the material that we bailed or we recovered. And it's not ours. We did our job, we recovered it. And that's why I'm saying, if there's all kinds of PET or film plastic grocery bags hanging around, what happens? People start paying attention. We're going to ban it. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Is the industry going to step up? I'm seeing the industry stepping up in certain areas right now because they're starting to realize that this is now become public. And the only people that are going to find the solution now is the producer themselves and not somebody else that closed their doors.
Chris, I think it's a great question. The one caveat I'd say there is that, as with many things, the devil's in the details. You could make things infinitely worse. These are complex systems. The most likely outcome of any change within a complex system is that you will fail more than you will succeed. It's like math. I can tell you a lot of ways to get math wrong, but there's only one way to get it right. That's the trick. So is EPR the solution? It could very well potentially be. And there's pros and cons examples, but again, devil's in the details.
Okay, now Daniel, you have a question? And by the way, Daniel, thank you for being here. Thank you for representing the waste industry who is noticeably absent here today. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I guess it's all three of you, or at least Lorenzo, Tony, and Al, have made different comments about driving change or some sort of change that needs to occur. And what's interesting to me as I look, actually, what's startling to me is zero waste is cost effective, which is good branding and good messaging that we created as we've gone along. But I think as you talk about being jarring and you got to change, do you want, I think from a collection point of view, do you need industry supporters like RCA or the Plastic Association to change their branding, to start different conversations? Because old conversations need to change. So I guess, Al, for that drive change, Lorenzo, I mean, you've made a comment, I think, to Strathcona County even. Are you willing to pay more for different ends? So the drive change and being jarring, do you need supporting associations to change now? Is that branding still appropriate? Right behind you.
Yeah. Well, that's what's driving it all. I mean, just because China shut their door doesn't mean we don't have to go to zero waste. We're going to look at zero waste. What we need to now look at is how we're going to achieve that seriously. That's the difference. Now, the collection systems have to change. If you have to source separation at the source, provide the tools at the source for the separation to occur. In a collection side, on an IC&I side, it's our fault telling a customer, just throw it all in that bin and then we're going to take it back. Well, maybe then he needs 5 toters at his site, one for 5 different materials. But if he separates it at the site and we collect it, there's markets for all the material. There's no market for the material when it's like mixed plastic. I don't know whoever came up with that because I don't even know what the definition is. It's, I would say it's everything I don't want to sort out for the moment and let somebody else finish it off. But if we don't, let's not do that. Let's just go to, there's all the materials. They all have a value. But we don't want that to happen, or we don't want it to happen. It's difficult. That's the change we need to make. But we can get to zero waste.
I think in response to your idea that, is now the time to step up. I mean, if we've been slowly paving the road to hell with good intentions, I can't imagine that now is not the time to take a U-turn. Now is the time to step up and to make changes. I believe that's very true.
I don't think Al wants me to speak. Okay, thanks, Al. But I think the changes is at multiple level. It's not just at a collection level or at a sorting level. The change started at the design, at the brand owner level, design for recyclability. This is where the changes has to start. Because we can collect, as Al said, we can sort, as Al said. But again, if it's not designed for recycling, we're not going to be able to recycle it. So the change has to be, and there should be check and balances. I mean, we all have a role to play. And, we don't like regulation, but regulation also are important. If there is no regulation, there is no, nobody can advance. So There should be accountability and regulation and check and balances for all, for recycler, for brand owner, for waste hauler, for all of us.
So instead of cost effective, you're saying it should be sustainable. Is that the change? Is that the different conversation we need to have is about sustainability and accountability?
I think I mean, if the package is designed right, the cost will go down. So I believe that sustainability and cost effectiveness kind of go hand in hand.
I think it's a good question that'll transition us into the kind of closing piece, which is really the amazing information we've gotten today. Now we need steps. Like, what are we going to do going forward now? You have a lot of information. I'm sure everybody knows a lot more about the Chinese market situation and markets in general than we did coming into this room. But what do we need now to move forward so that our industry, we do what we need to do so that our industry properly survives this whole situation? So, and all the panelists that are not up here right now, like Tom, that make sure that we may come to you on this as well in terms of what do we do now, knowing what we know and knowing what we don't know. Al, thank you. What do we do? Like, what's our next steps? What do we do now? So anybody from the audience that has an idea as to, so that you don't just go home, sort of overwhelmed with this information, what do we do now? How do we bring this all together? That would be awesome. Thank you.
I'm Tracy Bootler. I'm from the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo, also known as Fort McMurray. So what we did with this first off is, I have a MRF that was built in 2010. We have one sort line and one bale line and a baler and a landfill. That's it. So we have a two-stream system coming in, so that's a benefit for us as well. Another benefit is we have a single-use bag bylaw, no grocery bags, which is really good. So those three benefit things that we have. We also have a very successful composting program. What hit us hardest is the fiber products. We don't have a whole lot of newsprint. We have one newspaper that comes out, I think, once a week. We don't have the Sun, we don't have Edmonton, we don't have any of those stuff, so our newsprint is very limited. The other paper products that we have is boxboard and cardboard. So we notified all of the commercial entities out there that bring in any kind of cardboard paper products to us. And what we did is we sorted out, this is how we would like it. If you want to put out a container system out there with separate compartments in it, that's fine. We'll take it that way and we'll sort it, hand sort it on the floor and then bale it that way. That has worked for us. We have a lot of industry up there, the oil sands. They all mandate it to recycle everything that they come across. So they're all on board with us. They're helping us out. Now we're going into the public sector, the residents. That's the hard part. They've had no discipline since we started. The rollouts began in 2010 with a pilot project. 2012, the whole city ended up with their bins. No discipline about what went anywhere. So our lines were coming in with hoses, electrical, extension cords, shower curtains. We even got a grenade one time. So this is what we're getting on our sort line. So when we dealt with that one, the first thing that we did is we do a negative sort when that comes across. We just cherry pick what we want off of it and said, we can't sell anything else that's on there. We're going to have to just send it to the landfill. We took that hit. We cherry picked what's on there, and we went with what the markets were available at the time. So the biggest thing that we did do now is with the box board, is that we pulled out that box board material. We're running it through our grinder, mixing it with our wood chips, and sending it into our biosolids compost as a trial project right now. So far it's working out really well because we have a very low carbon nitrogen ratio in our box board right now, or in our compost right now. So that is working for us. That's our short term, what we do now. I can look at the road to 10 years down the road. What are we going to do? I don't know. Markets will change again. Markets will change next year. Right now, we need this stuff off of our floor. What are we going to do with it? So that was our mandate, is short-term education, deal with it now. So that's what we did.
Okay. Thank you. Do you guys have any comments on sort of having to do those short-term initiatives like that just to survive?
I believe we brought it up earlier, and I think right now it's do what you have to do to continue the programs that are in play, with understanding the cost of that program. I think that's what we, if we're to focus on anything, just focus on the cost and accepting the fact that that cost is going to change. I think we'll have movement on the product. I'm hoping that, in the next 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, there will be new markets or something's going to come about. But I believe that, once we have that cost in front of us, that it'll drive for change. It'll drive change. But in the interim, accept the fact that that's the challenge we really have. There aren't many things you can do right now. I mean, cleaning it or making better products not going to get you 10 cents more. So, maybe why do that? But what's important, though, is do you have movement? And if movement's there, and if it is India or whatever export market is, then that's the new reality, unfortunately, at whatever cost there is. And then it'll progress from there. But I think that to me is about the only thing, is accepting the cost. And from a private sector standpoint, even in our recycling operations right now, there's really huge impacts. When you're looking at corrugated and you're looking at the mixed paper pricing, I don't know, but I know our operations rely a lot on those bulk grades to keep the other things that we were doing going as well. So we've got to make some big decisions too. But right now it's floating and just trying to find more efficient ways to do what we're doing.
So rather than one set end result that we could, prescribe, I'd say there's some procedural steps we can sort of start to take, and one's to open up the communication between the municipalities and the processors and even the mills. And the mills, for a long time, have actually been the silent party. The end users, Allied Paper, Cancel, have been sort of left out of the discussions. A lot of times it's been Hull or municipality only. So we have to bring these other groups into communication. We have to be realistic and respectful of one another's positions, and we have to find, in and amongst that, in each individual context, each region, we have to find what those solutions will be. And as been alluded to, the solutions right now may be more short-term, and so this conversation is going to have to be ongoing. And there's going to be price impacts, there's going to be destination impacts, there's going to be acceptable material impacts, there's going to be a variety of things. And I just think that really needs to happen now, and that will lead us to solutions.
So Carl, are you keen to be part of further conversations with the end goal of getting better material for you?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, our end goal is we want clean products so we can make a good product for our customer. And in order to do that, we need clean news without the plastic, without the metal, without the glass, without the contaminants in it.
Say that into the microphone. That was really good, Tony.
I mean, the good thing is that now that China is out, they will listen to you.
Great. Yeah, that's a valid point. Tom, can you? Oh, is there another question? Okay, and then I'll come to you, Tom. Yes.
So Erin with Strathcona County. I just wanted to point out that there's quite a few of us in this room from the Capital Region Municipal Sustainability Group. So I know somebody had mentioned something about the municipalities talking to each other to kind of have the same brand messaging, have the same ideas out there. And so that talk is happening a lot around here. And I think what's coming back a lot is we need the same talk from the haulers and the processors too, because we don't all have the same hauler and processor. So to communicate that message out is harder when one person can accept one thing and one person can't. So we're looking for that same backing, that we're a united front over here pretty much, but we need that same thing on the back end too.
No, that's a great point. Tom, you've been, and I know it's because you have such a broader perspective than most of us, can you just leave us with what you think should be our next steps in terms of how we actually get through this? Sorry.
Well, yeah. Broader, yeah, to some degree, but not quite as advanced in a lot. You know, what you guys are doing up here with with what I'm hearing about the shareholders, it's way behind the times down south. It really is. You know, I guess I'm going to feed off what Lorenzo said. You know, all the stakeholders need to get in the same room. There's a common theme here, and that's critical. And we're not going to like, a lot of people aren't going to like what they hear, but I don't have to like what I hear as long as I know what is being said and what is being done. So, you know, that's just, you know, keep it up. Keep the conversation. I mean, this is great. Absolutely great. You have private, public. You have all sorts of different people in one room discussing and not holding back. And I think that's important, you know. So that's about it.
Oh, that's awesome. Like Mark said, you can't handle the truth. I think that's important. We need to know what the truth is. Is there another question? Paulina wasn't there? Okay, excellent. I'll just give you mine.
Steve Rosie with the City of Lethbridge. So you guys have some experience with the EPR model in BC right now, and you talked about the need to be flexible for change. So has that model needed to evolve and change yet, and is it working? Because we're thinking about things like that in Alberta these days.
I guess the question is, should we continue to work towards EPR in Alberta?
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the first time Tony let me speak first.
I have lots of weaknesses.
I think I said it earlier, you know, we're going to see EPR evolve now. And British Columbia is quite unique, of course, because it is privately managed. It's the entire province. It's one program. It's got all the things that we're talking about. The question then is, when will the brand owners get really connected with the outputs that are coming out of the province and take charge and deal with the materials as the end market? Okay, so that's the missing piece, because we've been able to move product. Tony's, you know, turns whatever into resin. We were moving the fibers across to China. Yes, we were doing that too. So now we need to look at what roles are they going to play in helping reduce their costs, because basically this is how we can look at it now, is that they're going to reduce their costs by stepping in if they choose to. If they don't, the costs are going to go up, and we're going to move materials and do what we're doing, and it'll carry on. That's why I'm saying it'd be interesting to see now where this could go. And the foundation is there. So the foundation is there in the province. It's all in place.
If I am a brand owner, if I was a brand owner and I don't have to look after the end of life of my package, you know, I wouldn't, there is no reason for me to be concerned about how is my package designed. There's no financial reason. But if I'm a brand owner and I'm responsible for the end of life of the package, I want to make sure that my package, and there is incentives, there is carrots and stick for my package to be compatible with existing infrastructure, then I will do every effort I can to make it compatible. So I have to pay less in the system. So there's no, you know, the first thing you need to do is, I mean, you know, again, this is all conceptually and this is all academically. Academically, you know, things should balance, and the feedback should get to the brand owner, and should help all of us to improve. You know, this technically, and the devil is in the detail, of course.
And just to support what Tony's saying is that, and so I guess if we can calculate the true cost of collecting each material type, and then that's reflected back to the producer, then those costs then will influence that producer possibly to make change.
Fantastic. Any last? Oh, okay. Sharon has a last comment, and so go ahead, go to Grant, and then I'll go to Sharon, and then we'll wrap.
I just want to say one more thing upon the same vein that Tony is going and Al's going, Lorenzo. If anybody in this room is willing to send me a truckload of post-consumer plastic with an order at $1 a kg, to take product back out of a list of things we make, and you can do the math. That's 20 ton, 20,000 kgs, that's $20,000 worth of product you can take back into your community, your municipality, your city, and use it. I'll take it tomorrow.
Okay, Sharon, I think you are going to get the last word.
So Leah was whispering in my ear, so it's really her last word. Where is, I'll take account for it. I'll say it. Where is the province of Alberta? So we do have David Swan, and we very much appreciate him being here, but where is a representative from not only the government, but from the bureaucracy as well? I think we understand that there are steps that we need to take as municipalities, as processors, as collectors, as manufacturers of products, but what we really need is some enabling legislation. So, come on, where are you?
Very, very valid point, and I think really for all of you and your MLAs, like for shame that the government is not here. It really is not good. Thank you so much. We are going to wrap there. I'm going to get you guys out 5 minutes early. This was fantastic and largely because of your participation. Thank you very much to all our presenters. I can't believe the amazing people we got together in this room. Fantastic. Thank you. Sorry? Oh, yeah. And thank you very much to Strathcona County for hosting us, and to the City of Edmonton for agreeing to host us, even though we didn't fit anymore. And thank you to our sponsors, Alberta Plastics Recycling Association and Canadian Plastics Industry Association. And if you like this event, make sure you come to the Recycling Council Conference in September in Banff. We'll do more of the same. Thank you so much, and we'll see you at the next one. If anybody's headed south past the airport, we've got somebody needs a ride to the airport, and we have somebody else that needs a ride to the south of Edmonton.